I took a job as night shift cab driver. My passengers aren't humans. My name is Felix. I am 22-year-old man who earns living off of small-time jobs. Made some bad decision during my teenage years and dropped out of high school at the age of 18. I was young, wild, and reckless. I didn't care about anyone's opinion and was privileged enough to be born in a decent household. My father earned a lot of money, so I never got a job. But came to my senses after my dad passed away in an accident. I was 18 at the time. The burden to provide for the family now fell on my shoulders. I had to put food in the table for myself, my mother, and my 7-year-old sister from then on. I did a lot of work just to get a sustainable income and mowed lawns, babysat for my neighbors, walked other people's dogs just to get my hands on a few dollars. At 20 years of age, I was not only doing the work I did when I was 18, but also got a nighttime job as a security guard at a mall. I was working really hard every day just to survive and was sleep deprived most of the time. And so after working like this for 2 years, I became irritable and short-tempered. I got fired from my job for misbehaving with the owner's son. Until that point of time, I did not know saving a girl from 2 drunk men touching and catcalling her was misbehaving. But okay. I started looking for a nighttime job on Craigslist and came across an ad. It was a job offer by a cab company. It read, "Position open as a night shift cab driver at R Cabs. Work 6 hours a day, 12 a.m. to 6 a.m., 6 days a week. Earn. For further queries, call. Phone number omitted." I was excited on seeing such a great offer. I calculated the monthly income, which came out to total around $300 and $600 a month. With this amount of money, I could stop mowing lawns and taking care of babies, all while providing for my family and even buying them gifts every once in a while. Not to mention the fact that because I would not be working day shifts if I got this job, I could catch up on my sleep. I called up the number given on the ad. A smooth, high-pitched male voice answered the call. He introduced himself as Dave. I inquired about the job, and after a quick interview over the phone, I got hired. The only thing that struck me as odd were some of the questions he asked. Majority of them were pretty normal. Are you nocturnal or have difficulty staying up at night? What's your age? But he also asked some rather odd questions. Are you an imaginative man? Can you follow a strict list of rules to the T if asked to? Can you keep calm under hazardous conditions and drive safe, even when you're speeding? The questions raised some red flags, but I was too blinded by the high amount of pay they were offering. He told me I could start as soon as today. I looked at the clock hanging from the wall. It was 10:12 p.m. I told him I would be there at 12 a.m. sharp. My mother was ecstatic when I gave her the news. She was more happy with the fact that I would spend more time with her and catch up on some sleep that she was with the pay. I thought of buying her something nice as soon as I completed my first month of work and collected. I reached the decided location at 11:58 p.m. It was just a kilometer away from my house, so I didn't bother bringing my car. As Dave said, the company will be providing the cabs. At 12 a.m. sharp, a Prius pulled up and parked in front of me. A man wearing all black got out of the car and walked over to me. He greeted me with a warm smile and gave me the keys to the car. I was supposed to be driving. It was the Prius. He congratulated me on getting the job. He set up the RCAB app on my mobile phone and just before leaving, handed me a piece of paper and $50, then said, "Read this paper as soon as you can. It is a list of rules for you to follow." With this, he turned around and started walking into the night. After I saw his turn the corner, I got into the car, closed the doors and smoothed out the folded piece of paper and started reading. It read, "Hey Felix, this is Dave. Now, there is something you should understand. Only you can read the text on this piece of paper. So there is no point in going to the cops or suing us, because frankly no one would believe you. Keep that in mind. And also, majority of the people you will pick up and drop will not be human. Rule 1. If you get a pickup request from a number with only 6 digits, call them up and politely decline. Do not go within 100 meters of their location for next 2 hours. Always apologize and make up a reason why you cannot come. The creature doesn't take rude remarks well. Rule 2. Always seat the passengers in the back seat and check their mirror reflection. If they have a reflection, drop them off to their location. And do not ask for money. They will pay as they wish. If they do not have a reflection, take the pistol in the glove compartment and shoot yourself. It will be a marginally painless death compared to what they will do to you. Rule 3. Do not eat anything non-vegetarian in the cab. The smell of meat might capture some Richi's unwanted attention. And believe me when I say, you do not want their attention. Rule 4. If you get a call from a person you know, do not answer the call. It is not them. If you do respond to them, you will hear a deafening screech which has been responsible for bursting eardrums in the past. Rule 5. Do not try to abandon the car on the road, or you will die the most brutal way your brain can imagine. Yes, they can read minds. Rule 6. You cannot give this job us without working here for at least 2 weeks. For the reasons I cannot specify because of the company's policy. Rule 7. If you get dark figures running along the car, speed up and try to ignore them. Do not stop or slow down. If you maintain a speed of 80 plus kilometers, they will not be able to catch you. The other option is driving on a busy road. They will perform mock charges and give you illusions that they are gaining on you. But if you're driving fast, just keep driving fast for 3 to 4 more minutes and they will be gone. Rule 8. If you smell rotten meat in the back seat, do not look behind you. Instead, take the pistol from the glove compartment, close your eyes, turn around and fire on all the 3 back seats. It will be gone. It can't hurt you if you cannot see it. Rule 9. If your engine dies down, do not step out of the car. It is a bait to get you out. Wait for 20 to 30 minutes and the car should start right back up. Rule 10. Do not dial anyone. They will not pick up. Calling for help also annoys the creatures after you. Your most beloved person might die of natural causes just the next day if you try to reach out to people who will not be picking up because their phones won't even be ringing. Rule 11. At 6 a.m., bring this car to your house. Leave the key in and walk back inside your home. The car will disappear in an hour or so and will be right back there the next night at 12 a.m. I chuckled at the stupid list. Scary prank on the new guy, huh? I whispered under my breath and started driving. After just 5 to 10 minutes, my mom started calling. Just before I could pick it up, I froze with fear. I could smell the scent of rotting meat. I slowly opened the glove compartment, took out the pistol, closed my eyes, then turned around and shot 6 rounds, 2 bullets at each seat. I heard a loud shriek. After about 5 seconds, I opened my eyes to see that the seats were empty, but one of the windows was open and there was some blood on the left seat. I cleaned it up with a towel kept in the glove compartment and started driving. I got a request. It was a regular number. I started driving towards its location. The passenger was a girl. She got in the back seat and I started driving. I slowly tilted the rearview mirror, hoping and praying that she had a reflection. Luckily she did. We eventually reached her destination, which was on a farm on the outskirts of town. She tipped me $10, got out of the car, and climbed up one of the farm's walls with ease. I sat there in the car, shocked. Eventually the bleating of goats and the sound of flesh tearing broke me out of my trance, and I started driving away. After half an hour of contemplating what I had just witnessed, I received another request. I checked its location. It was as if my heart stopped beating. When I saw the passenger's number, it only had 6 digits and was just 87 meters away from me. I started my car back up and started driving. It was gaining on me. I started panicking. It was only 50 meters away from me. I could now feel the ground shaking, footsteps and low-pitched growls. I sped up to nearly 100 kilometers per hour and noticed that I was successfully moving away from it. I was 92 meters away from it when I noticed them. The dark figures, they were running alongside my car. I almost swerved off the road and into a wall 2 times, but I kept my cool and tried my best to ignore them. The figures, which looked like shadows of a human just a minute ago, distorted into demonic shadows within seconds. Walls around me started to bleed. I somehow maintained a consistent speed of nearly 100 kilometers without crashing. And after a short, intense change, everything was suddenly back to normal. I was beginning to think I had lost my mind. I wanted to call my mother, but with everything that had happened up till that point of time, I did not want to break a rule. Then I remembered I had to make a call to the passenger and apologize. And that's what I did. It sounded like a charismatic young over the phone, but I knew better. After this whole ordeal was over, it was just 4 a.m. The next 2 hours passed by pretty normally. I picked up 3 more passengers, but they seemed normal. I did exactly what Dave told me to do, parked the car outside my house and went to sleep. I woke up at 9 a.m. and gave my mother the $150. She was really happy. I knew if I told her what had actually gone down, she would not believe me. So I am sitting here, Typing this at 10 p.m. I do not want to go back to that car again, but I have no option and no one will believe me. If I die, here lies my story. If I make it through this night, I will be grateful to God. I just wanted to know, has anybody else gotten this job offer from our cabs? Nancy had worked in mental health group homes and facilities for over 30 years. She had seen it all, and not much frightened her, preferring night shifts due to a lifelong struggle with insomnia. She figured that if she wasn't going to get any sleep at night anyway, she might as well be working. The pay wasn't great, but it paid her bills, and she enjoyed the connections that she made with her co-workers and residents over the years. When the night shift opening at Everlove Behavioral Health Group Home was posted 6 weeks ago, she immediately applied and got the job. As she lay on the living room couch in the darkened front room, she listened to the sounds that penetrated the quiet. The ticking of the clock that hung next to the television sounded loud in her ears. A car would drive by every so often, lighting the room briefly with its headlights. Besides the low hum of the refrigerator, there were few other sounds. But what is that shuffling noise? It was familiar, as she had heard it every night of the last month she had worked at Everlove. The first few times she heard the shuffling noise, she just assumed residents also struggled to sleep at night and were pacing around in their rooms. She never looked for the source, because it didn't occur to her that the noise didn't belong. Long hours awake at night meant that she often heard strange sounds that were simply masked by the relatively louder daytime noises. But this time she was more aware of the sound. This time felt different. That is when she realized she could also hear quiet murmuring. She strained to hear the words, but it was far too quiet. Slowly walking into the hallway, the sound became more distinct, and she could tell it was coming from Stan's room. Stan suffered from schizophrenia and frequently had auditory and visual hallucinations. Hesitating at the door, she wondered if she should knock and check on him, or just let it pass. She was just about to turn back to the couch when Stan began yelling, "I won't do it. You can make me." Nancy knocked on the door, announcing that she was coming in to check on him and not to be alarmed. The only response was murmuring and sobbing, so she slowly opened the door. Stan was lying in the fetal position in bed, repeating the same line over and over. "I won't do it." Stan was clearly distressed, and Nancy asked if he would like his as-needed prescription sedative. At first he claimed, but after a few minutes of soothing talk, he accepted the pill and fell back to sleep. Back to the couch in the darkened living room she went. Back to the ticking clock, the humming refrigerator, and the occasional passing car. The shuffling noise had stopped, and Nancy had all but forgotten about the previous incident with Stan when again she heard him yell. This time it was not words but a guttural scream. Afraid that his outburst would wake the whole house and cause even more trouble for her, she ran to his room and threw open the door without knocking. Stan was no longer in bed. He was standing straight up with a look of pure horror on his face, and a bedside lamp clutched in his hand. Nancy was no fool, and she knew better than to try to restrain him. She calmly asked Stan what was bothering him, and offered to help in any way that she could. Stan just stood there gripping the lamp and staring directly at something invisible to Nancy. Several minutes of cajoling worked, and she managed to get him to release the lamp and get into bed. Stan's demeanor changed. The electric energy he had been exuding had relaxed into tearful exhaustion. He begged her to check his room before she left. He wouldn't tell her what to look for. It was just something that shouldn't be there. After checking every square inch of the room, he sighed and fell asleep once more. Nancy left the room amazed that Stan had that reaction, considering the highly potent sedative he had taken just an hour prior. Her watch said 4 in the morning, 3 more hours until her day shift relief person would arrive. Hopefully all would be peaceful until then. By 5 in the morning, the winter sky was still dark and residents were all still in their rooms. That's when Nancy heard the strangest sound yet. She strained her ears once more to try and figure out what it was. At first she heard the familiar shuffling. That was followed by some quiet groans and heavy breathing. After a few minutes she heard what sounded like dripping. What could possibly be dripping? Nancy checked every sink and shower. No faucets were dripping. Where was it coming from? That's when she turned the bend from one of the bathrooms to the hallway, with Stan's bedroom. The dripping noise was definitely coming from that room. Had it been daytime, there is no way she would have heard it. However, the night shift was quiet, and each drop left a distinctive sound as it hit the hardwood floor. Quietly, Nancy knocked on Stan's door. No answer. She then whispered, "Stan, Are you up? Do you need some help with something? No answer. She wrestled in her head whether or not to open the door. If he was asleep, she didn't want to wake him. He was so distressed earlier. He needed the sleep, and she didn't want the other residents to be disturbed. After some back and forth, she decided to let him be, until med-call at 7. The sun slowly rose and light began to fill the group home through the large living room window. Nancy's relief worker would be here soon. She just needed to dole out each resident's morning medications. She realized with a start that she could still hear the dripping sound. She must have tuned it out the past couple of hours. Maybe she did fall asleep on the couch after all. Curious, she walked back to Stan's room. Yes, the dripping was not her imagination. As far as she knew, the only liquid in the room was a small glass of water on the nightstand from when he took his pill the night before. But that small of an amount would certainly not still be dripping if it spilled 2 hours before. She quietly knocked and whispered to Stan again through the door, but there was no answer. As silently as she could, Nancy opened the door a crack to peek inside. Stan was not in bed. She opened the door all the way. Stan was not to be found. There was only one place to hide in this room: the closet. Summoning all her courage, Nancy slowly walked over to the closet and gripped the doorknob. The dripping could be heard even louder. She very slowly opened the door, revealing Stan sitting in darkness inside. As she turned on the closet light, the full horror of what she was seeing hit her. Blood rivulets were dripping from Stan's gouged eyes and ears. The droplets made a very distinctive sound as they hit the wooden floor. He was gripping a bloody pencil and smiling. Sensing her presence, he said, "I finally got them to stop. I finally got them to leave me alone," with fresh and drying blood covering his face and clothing. Nancy was just about to help him out of the closet when she stopped and froze in fear. Not because of the terrible sight in front of her, but the unmistakable sound of shuffling right behind her. Working in fast food chains isn't really anyone's dream job. Working the night shift as a girl where sketchy individuals often show up doesn't make the task better. The slow and weary movement of time had me praying that no customer would enter for the last remaining 5 minutes before closing. I observed as Keith polished the tables and allowed myself to be lulled to relaxation as Jason's sweet voice reverberated from the kitchen, while Martha, our manager, had hid herself away in her office to finish the day's remaining duties. The sound of approaching footsteps snapped me away from reading the kiddie meal activity sheet, only for my eyes to meet an angelic face of a man. A smile so warm made me smile as well that it took a while before I could utter a welcome and ask for his order. His ocean eyes scanned the top menu while biting his lower lip, and the sight alone made me consider loving the night shift. His attention returned to me, still sporting that smile, but what he said next made my stomach drop. "I'd like the jumbo burger, please. But instead of the usual beef, I'd like your meat instead." He said those words in such a friendly manner as if it was the most normal thing in the world, while I couldn't even breathe. I waited for a haha just kidding, but it never came. "Hello?" he asked as he waved a hand right in front of me, trying to snap me out of shock. Sorry, you close in 5 minutes, right? That's not enough time to cook your meat. I personally love the buttocks, meatiest part for me." He chuckled as he sent a wink my way. My tongue felt non-existent as fear took over my system. The ringing in my ears managed to muffle his voice and the horror that left his mouth. "Okay, so I guess I'll just have the large fries and large Coke, please. Thank you so much." His last request was said with such a polite tone that I felt like my mind was ready to lose it. I watched as he took the table near the door right next to where Keith was cleaning. I felt cursed, like I was hexed to stand in that spot forever with only the nightmare to keep me company. Keith's running form was enough to shake me out of my trance and allowed me to finally say the word "what" as he pulled me into the kitchen. Jason gave us a questioning look, but before he could even inquire, Keith spat out words that made the horror even worse. That man out there showed me a cut on top of his finger that had sliced through the skin, and before I could even offer a band-aid, he deliberately pulled that skin back with his teeth, pulled it off and chewed it as he kept smiling at me. What the fuck is this shit? I felt every tension in Keith's body as he paced back and forth, trying not to heave. Jason turned ghostly white at that, and we saw how he struggled to process the situation. When I recounted what that man said to me, a 911 call was made by Martha when everything was explained to her. Jason sat in front of the locked door of the office holding a knife just in case the man decided to come after us, while Keith held my hand the whole time. as the tremors started to wreck my body. The police arrived after a short time, but upon inspection, the man was no longer in the premises. Statements were taken, and even the authorities couldn't hide the disgust that got etched in their faces as our story got unfolded. Sleep never came to me that night, and I quit the very next day. Walking the streets had become something so difficult now, as I had developed a fear of strangers smiling. Whatever happened that night clearly ruined me. He was never found, and I pray every day that he wouldn't find me. To those working the night shift, please always be careful. Deception is a mask that fits everyone. I work the late night shift at a fast food drive-thru. After my last shift, I never want to work there again. I work the night shift at a small fast food restaurant 5 nights a week. The food joint is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and I just happen to be the unlucky bastard who has to work the drive-thru from midnight until 8 in the morning. Well, me and 16-year-old Ethan, but he might as well not be there. In fact, he isn't really there because he prefers to go out in the car park and get high. I would complain about him, but he is the boss' son, so it wouldn't do much good anyway. So, 5 times a week I run this restaurant basically by myself. Usually it's fine. Not many customers come through at that time, apart from a few young people and a few stoners that have the munches. So, usually it is an easy shift. Except for last night. The events of last night make me want to never work the night shift again. It all started when I arrived at work at midnight, like I always do. I managed to quickly say hello to Ethan before he quickly made his way out to the car park. The joint practically lit as he was walking outside. I then went over to the cooking area, made sure that everything was working properly. Then I made my way over to the drive-thru window, put on my headset and watched the cameras for the first customer to arrive. It was around 12:30 when the first car drove up to the drive-thru speaker and places their order. A large chips and a 12-pack of nuggets. The usual sort of order that you get at this time of night. I served them their food and wishes them a good night. Then I began to wait for the next customer. It was 1:15 when the old black Cadillac first drove up to the drive-thru speaker. The Cadillac looked quite used and the black paint was beginning to fade and was now a more gray color. All of the windows were very darkly tinted and it was impossible to see into the car from the cameras. I heard a slight crackly sound through my headset and saw that the driver of this car had wound down his window just a crack, enough to speak through but not enough to see into the car. He had then cleared his throat, which was the sound that I heard through the headset speaker. "Good evening, what would you like to order?" I asked through the microphone. A deep, croaky voice then replied, "I am after some chicken nuggets and a kid's meal." I heard the croaky voice say through the speaker in my ear, "I can get you some nuggets, sir. That's not a problem," I replied to the man. "But unfortunately, the kids' meal is only available between 6 a.m. and 9 p.m., so I cannot give you that at the moment." I thought I was polite with my answer, but the man driving the Cadillac obviously didn't agree because he quickly replied, "You son of a bitch. You won't serve me because I am not a kid," he said, with obvious contempt towards me. Before I could reply, the front wheels of the Cadillac began to spin and a little bit of smoke started spewing from the back tires. Suddenly the car lurched forward and I quickly saw the red of his tail lights. Then he was gone. He had driven out of the drive-thru at great speed, obviously in anger. It was very strange, but I had dealt with angry and slightly unhinged customers before, and so I didn't really think too much of it. It wasn't until I saw the same black Cadillac pull up an hour later that I thought that something wasn't quite right here. The car slowly made its way up to the drive-thru speaker, its headlights shining brightly into my eyes as it drove. Once I saw that the car was lined up with the speaker, I knew that I had to be diplomatic about this and try my best to sound friendly and polite. "Hello, how can I help you tonight? What would you like to order?" I said in the best customer service voice I could muster. There was silence for a moment, and then, through the camera, I saw the driver's side window begin to slow down. Once again, only a small crack, not big enough to see through. Then I heard the same, deep and croaky voice speak. "I want to order the kids' meal," the voice said. Or rather, it demanded. "I am very sorry, sir, but the kids' meal is not available at this time," I replied, still trying to sound as friendly as possible. "It's because I'm not a child, isn't it? That's why you won't serve me the kids' meal," the voice responded, with a more aggressive tone. "I mean, technically you do have to be under 18 in order to purchase a kids' meal at this restaurant, or you need to be purchasing it for someone under 18. But that is not the issue tonight. It is because you are trying to board." I was cut off from speaking by the sound of the engine roaring and the tires screeching, as the Cadillac suddenly took off in a cloud of smoke coming from the back tires. It was beginning to be a bit more concerning that this man was so desperate for a kid's meal, but at this point I was still just thinking that he was a difficult customer. The next hour of my shift went like normal. I served a few high school kids who must have just got their license. I then served a group of people who were in the back of a taxi. This was all pretty normal for the late shift at the drive-thru, and I thought my night was returning to normal, until I saw two bright headlights appear. They were blindingly bright, and though I had to squint just to see past the beams of light that were penetrating into my eyes, I didn't even really have to squint to know who it was that was driving towards the drive-thru speaker. I knew it was the black Cadillac once again. The car pulled up next to the speaker. The dark tinted window rolled down just an inch, and then I heard the same voice through my headset. "I have asked you time and time again for a kid's meal and you will not provide. I know it is because you know I am not a kid, and so you will not serve me. Well, I guess what? I went and found a kid, so now you have to serve me." As soon as I heard the words "found a kid," I began to get incredibly nervous. What did he mean by that? I didn't know how to respond to this. I stood there in the small drive-thru booth for a moment, not knowing what to do or say. Then my headset let out a small crackle, and once again I heard the croaky voice. "Would you like to see?" the voice said just before it let out a small raspy laugh. A laugh that I could tell meant nothing good. It sounded like he wanted to show me, and he knew that what he had to show me, I wouldn't think. Before I could respond, I heard a loud thud through my headset. It startled me and brought me back to the reality of my situation. My heart began to pump faster, and I could feel sweat beginning to form on my forehead. I then noticed the image that was being shown on the screen in front of me. I could see the black Cadillac on the screen, and on the passenger's side, I could see that there was now someone sitting there. I recognized them instantly. It was Ethan. His head was being pressed up to the black tinting, but you could tell who it was. "See, I told you that I now had a kid, so will you serve me my kid's meal?" The voice suddenly spoke. I pulled the headset off of my head and threw it to the ground. I didn't want to hear anymore. I was about to try and run outside, to try and help Ethan, but before I could even move, the black Cadillac began to move and it disappeared from the drive-thru and into the night. I quickly rang the police, and they soon sent a couple of officers out to assist me. I explained everything that had happened, about the black car, about the driver wanting the kids' meal, and of course about Ethan. I described his face being pressed up against the windscreen and how the man had driven off with him still in the car. The police wrote all of this down, and just after I had finished describing the night's events to one of the officers, the other one suddenly burst into the room into a panic. I don't remember all the details of what happened after that. It all passed by as a blue, but I do remember both officers rushing outside. I know that I followed them. I wanted to know what was happening. I do remember walking through the car park and then walking up to what both the officers were standing over. And I definitely remember the sight of Ethan's headless body lying on the ground, a joint still lit in his hand. The rest of the night went past quickly. The police continued to question me, and I don't remember much about it. What I do remember, though, very vividly, was when I returned home in the early hours of the morning. I walked up to my front porch and saw a box sitting on the front step. As I got closer and closer, I slowly began to realize what the box was. It was a kids' meal box from my restaurant, just sitting by itself on the front porch. I got closer to it, and when I was close enough to grab it, I very slowly leant down to pick it up. When I began to lift it, I could feel that it was a bit weighty. There was definitely something inside the box. I slowly lifted the lid. The strong smell of meat started to waft into my nose. I really didn't want to keep on lifting the lid, but I just couldn't stop myself. I lifted the lid the rest of the way. Inside, when I looked, I saw that it was filled with chicken nuggets. That wasn't what was disturbing thought. What was so disturbing was that, in the middle of the box, on top of all of the nuggets, was a severed nose. My first night shift. Yesterday was my first day of work at local retail store. I started my shift at 4, and I would get off when it closed at 9. For an hour everything was busy, but at 5 most of the employees left and the only associates left were me, 2 other cashiers and a manager. We stayed in our assigned area and dusted and straightened things out for an hour. It was pouring rain outside now, so no one was coming in. I noticed a man coming through the door. He was drenched in water, and he looked around the store kind of frantic. He practically ran through the men's department, quickly picking up a shirt that was noticeably too small for him, and a hat. While I was entering my service pin on the register, I saw him hunched over and leaning against a pillar. I was concerned. He looked like he was going to pass out. "Sir, are you all right? Do you want a bottle of water?" He was still hunched over with both hands on his knees. He was breathing hard, and he just straightened himself up quickly and banged his fist on the table in front of me. "Just scan this shit already." I wasn't going to bother asking him if he wanted a rewards card or free magazines. That would piss him off more. I took the security tags off both items, and the man was getting angrier and angrier. He started walking in circles with his hands on top of his head, and he walked over and kicked the pillar he was leaning against moments ago. I was finishing the transaction and asked him to put his card into the machine. He stumbled close and was sweating pretty bad. I gave him his receipt, and he just snatched the bag, then awkwardly ran out the front doors. My trainer saw the whole thing and told me I handled him well, but I was concerned. He looked like he was having an opioid overdose, which is very common around here. A few hours later, I was out by the front window putting up Christmas ornaments on the store's tree. It's only October. It irritates me too. It was still pouring rain by. I noticed a car parked in front of the store, and it had its lights on. Looking closer, I saw the interior lights were on too. I ignored it for a while, but after an hour, and with the car still there and with the time being almost 8 at night, it was suspicious. To get a closer look, I went to clean the windows and saw a shadowy figure of a person in the front seat of the car. I saw that the person's body was contorted in an odd way. They were slumped to the side from what I could tell. Just to be on the safe side, I went to notify my manager. We both went outside in the rain to the blue car, and now I could see that it was the man from earlier. He was slumped, unconscious in his seat, and had the car still running for hours now. We called 911, and the police and paramedics came to help him. By the time the police were done asking us questions, it was closing time. Everyone got their stuff and headed back outside. They all made jokes about how my first day was one of the craziest out of the bunch. I'm curious to know, if this was one of the crazy ones, what other ones are there? I work at the night library. We operate under an eccentric set of rules. It makes sense when you think about it. The quiet kids, the queer kids, the nerds, and the geeks and the loners. When everyone else is out at bars and clubs until 2 in the morning, sloppy drunk and shoving their tongues against each other's uvulas in front of God and his brother, where are they supposed to go? All the calm, hushed corners of the world are inaccessible after around 8 o'clock. No cafes to tuck into to sip on something sweet while clacking away at a keyboard. No bookstores with their worn, welcoming armchairs looking to beckon in the weary. No library, except Matt's. Matt Nelson, my boss, is the director of the night library, for lack of a better term. Does he possess the credentials to occupy the position of a library director? Let's just say if tearing through a pack of cigarettes and a pot of coffee in an hour were the top qualifiers, there would be no better man for the job. But the night library doesn't have a board of trustees to answer to, which means Matt's GED may as well be a master's. It isn't a public establishment. Nobody's paying for its existence with their tax dollars, and the books don't come straight off the press from the publishing house. Ink still wet, pages still hot. I like to think of it as the half-price books of the library world. Our collection is made up of any and everything anyone is willing to contribute, which leaves us with a total sitting somewhere around a cool 1,000 items. It's a good thing too, because we wouldn't have enough of a staff to manage it all otherwise. In all, there are 7 of us, or 8, if you count Doug, but no one's entirely sure he exists. Alice is our cataloger, and Matt's very first employee. When he set out to open the night library's doors, he knew he would need a way to keep track of his inventory, and he only trusted himself to do so with the number of books he could count on both hands. The way he tells it, Alice laughed in his face when he propositioned her. She was working the streets at the time, and when he pulled up to her corner in his '97 Ford Ranger, cranking the window down at a geriatric snail's pace, to ask if she was interested in alternative employment, she told him whatever he was paying in a week couldn't hold a candle to what she made in an evening. He handed her his card, which was actually the business card for a local nail salon covered in whiteout and scribbled over with a Sharpie marker, and told her to give him a call if she changed her mind. To this day, she won't tell him why, but when his phone rang smack in the middle of the night less than a week later, it was Alice on the other end. What in God's green hell would anybody want with a library open dusk to dawn? She asked him once he'd elaborated on the position he was offering. Just let me know, he told her. She was outside the door 20 minutes later. After Alice came Della. She wandered inside one night in the dead of winter, fingertips purple and eyelashes weighted down with ice. Matt was mopping melted snow out of the entryway, and she stopped in front of him, blocking his path. "Can I help you?" he asked. No response. He took a moment to size her up, gauging the situation, and tried again. "Are you looking for work?" She snatched the mop straight out of his hand. She's never spoken a word to any of us, but not a speck of dust falls on a single surface before she catches it mid-air. We aren't sure if Della is even really her name. Matt just caught her writing it on the bathroom wall with foam cleaner one night, and when he asked, there was no objection. Horace was next. He'd been a regular patron of the library for quite some time before Matt took notice of the way he meticulously studied the shelves, halting anytime he spotted a misplaced item to correct it before moving on. Matt stopped him as he was straightening a row of outdated medical texts and said if he was going to volunteer his time, he might as well get paid. Jenny followed not too long after, and she was certainly the most forthright of the crew. She marched directly up to the desk just before closing time and said to Matt, "Don't you have a life outside of this place?" Matt says now that he supposes he should have taken offense, but seeing as how he did not, in fact, have a life outside of the library, he didn't. "No," he told her plainly. "Why?" "Because apparently Jenny popped her gum here," which invited Matt to consider banning gum from the premises entirely. Then he thought, given that he'd never banned anything from the premises, gum seemed like the wrong place to start. "You're here, like every night. Don't you want some time off? I could run the desk for you. It doesn't look very hard." "Okay," Matt said. He gave her a crash course of the circulation system, which isn't a real circulation system at all. One of his tech acquaintances built the program and it runs exactly as well as we need it to, with no room to spare. Tossed her the keys and headed home. Wiley would be the token charity case, except that they'd bust their ass harder than the rest of us put together for this place. The first couple of times they came around, they covered one of their eyes with their bangs and hung out in the library's dismal excuse for a teen area from sundown to sunup, never lingering quite long enough to be told they had to leave before Matt locked up, but certainly cutting it close. While Matt was standing on a ladder one night trying to stuff enough paper towels around a faulty sprinkler head to keep it from saturating a ceiling tile, Wiley nearly scared him to his death coming up behind him without a sound. "I want to make a deal with you," they said. Once Matt had recovered from his miniature heart attack and regained his balance, he peered down the ladder to find Wiley staring up at him, face fully bared to him for the first time. Right eye bloodshot and swollen with a bruise so dark it resembled a pit just beginning to yellow around the edges. "All right," he agreed, not bothering to ask what the deal might entail. As it turned out, Wiley's bargain was this: anonymity in exchange for labor. "No one can know where I am," Wiley explained. "I can give you my legal name, or an ID, or my social, but I'll work hard and I'll do it for free if I can stay here. I won't run up the water or the electric. I won't turn any lights on or even use the bathroom during the day. It'll be like the building is empty the whole time it's closed. I swear. I just need somewhere to lock myself in." Matt's only conditions were that Wiley A, accept a paycheck, and B, keep their arrangement quiet, as he didn't need everyone in a rough spot to come to him, expecting that they could strike the same deal. Wiley said, "I have no one to tell," and then asked where Matt kept his tools. "If we've ever had a leak since, or a blown bulb, or a fried computer monitor, it hasn't lasted long enough for Matt to call a repairman before Wiley's had it fixed. As for me, it was sort of a fluke that I was hired at all. I don't sleep much during the night. In fact, I've only ever had one day shift job, and my body's internal alarm clock wasn't a fan of that arrangement. I was working overnights at a nursing home before the library, and I happened to pass by on a night off after a walk too antsy to sit alone in my apartment. I'd never noticed it before, which isn't unusual for me, as I pride myself in my attention span's ability to give goldfish a run for their money, but the dim glow emanating from inside among the sea of darkened storefronts stood out like a beacon. My first impression, based on the interior of the building, was that it had likely been a laundromat in a past life, with its paltry concrete floors and low tiled ceilings. The short, sparse shelves lined along the entryway for new books and special displays I now know led me in a natural progression to the circulation desk, where Matt had his face buried in his hands and Jenny was holding open a book next to him that had cracked fully down the spine, loose pages lying haphazardly across the countertop. Can't afford to replace shit all the time, Matt was saying, muffled by his palms. Whatever. If it's too bad to glue it, just, I don't know, throw it away, I guess. I'm not sure what possessed me to do so, but I took a step forward, fingering the edge of the front cover. I can fix it, I said, and then, as though such a vague explanation would make the situation less awkward somehow, I do that. Fix books. Matt's head raised slowly, as though someone had attached it to a string. Got a whole tower in the back. Can you fix all of them? I mean, I'd have to look at them first. I told him. I've never done it on like a professional level, but my grandpa had some book presses he left me when I was in high school, so I've been doing it as a hobby for 10 years, give or take. Matt seemed to mull this over for a moment. Most of what we've got's not anything special, but there are a couple of collector's items here and there. Signed copies, first editions, stuff like that. Can't find them damn near anywhere. And if you do, people want a pretty penny for them. What's your name? Adam. Matt stuck his hand across the desk. Welcome aboard, Adam. When can you start? That was about 3 years ago. Which doesn't sound like a ton of time, granted. But there are some things around here you have to get used to. So quick that by 3 months in you start to feel like a seasoned vet. Every place has its odd little ins and outs, of course. We've got plenty. The back door next to the dumpster sticks from the outside, so we have to prop it open to take the trash out unless we want to walk around to the front. One of the bathroom lights is finicky. When the switch is flipped, they all shut off, but the very center panel, and it takes a few tries to make it cooperate. Our power gets knocked out so easily in storms that we've got about a metric fuckton of battery-operated fans to keep cool and a whole manual checkout system for when the computers are down. But, as inconvenient as these little quirks can be at times, they're things we're all more than happy to deal with day to day. Matt's a good boss. He takes care of us. With what little means he has, we don't get benefits. But he pays us for a full week of sick days each fiscal year, and we get paid holidays off if we have something going on that we need to miss for. He never says no. We essentially set our own schedules, and there's no minimum to the number of hours we can work so long as we're cool with the cut on our checks. The break room stays stocked with generic snacks and off-brand sodas, and as long as we're not tending to a patron, he genuinely couldn't care less whether we're on our phones or listening to music. As long as our work is done, we don't have a dress code. No staff meetings. No 8-hour trainings. I won't be a millionaire anytime soon, but the pay is good. Better than I expected. When Matt told me at the beginning of my interview, which was actually just me filling out paperwork, what the pay rate was, I couldn't help raising a brow. I don't have a degree, I informed him, in case somehow he'd confused me with someone whose life was far more put together, or any experience in the field. Technically.
I know, he said. Just think of it as incentive. I hope it's enough to keep you around.
I didn't understand at first what the hell that was supposed to mean. We're in a slightly rougher area of town, so I figured maybe we'd run into the occasional dispute or keyed up addict. Then I finished my entry packet and flipped it over to find the last paper on the table, simply titled Staff Rules. It read as follows. 1. If you come across a man named Doug, tell him that of course you recognize him. Furthermore, ask why he's introducing himself as you've worked together since you were hired. He will laugh and ask your forgiveness for being so forgetful, at which point you should be clear to go about your day. However, if he happens to ask if you think he's doing all right at his job, be sure to tell him he's doing so well that if he ever left, we could never hire someone else to take his place. 2. There is no pool in the library, not in the basement, which does not exist, nor on the roof. If someone asks if you've been swimming in the pool yet, do not give a definitive answer. Simply say that you don't like to swim. Important. Do not say you can swim, just that you don't enjoy it. If you see a pool, exit the building and do not return until sunset the next evening. You're simply exhausted from working night shifts. 3. Do not bring peanuts or any peanut products into the building. Horace, our page, is allergic. 4. The second floor is only storage. Nothing is moving upstairs. If you think you hear anything unusual, i.e. scratching, stomping, humming, it's either the HVAC system or the pipes. 5. All of the keys that you need can be found on the keyring in the drawer below the time clock. If you come across a door that isn't labeled on the cheat sheet for the keys, you don't need to open it. It's likely just maintenance access. 6. Staff parking is in the upper lot. 7. When working in the children's area, do not be alarmed if books fall off the shelves from time to time. It's nearly imperceptible to the naked eye, but several of the shelves are built at a slight angle. 8. The coffee pot in the staff kitchen is free for everyone to use, and coffee supplies are located in the cabinet above the microwave. If you pick up the coffee pot and find that it is full of a dark, viscous substance, simply clean it out in the sink before using it. Just plug your nose while doing so. 9. We do not have gender-specific restrooms, and any protest in regards to such will not be tolerated. 10. If you see an elderly Hispanic woman dressed in mourning garb crying quietly with her head down at the table in the back corner next to non-fiction, do not approach her. However, if she makes eye contact with you of her own accord, be sure to offer her your condolences. If she signals for you to come closer, tell her that you're sorry but you have to get back to work. If she starts to stand, turn calmly away and begin walking at a brisk but unalarmed pace back toward the front of the building. Do not look behind you. Do not run. 11. On the last Saturday of each month, our custodian Della uses a specific cleaning solution mop. The red coloration comes from the active ingredient, which is what protects the floors and keeps them from staining in the event of spills. It is not blood. 12. Please do not use Windex on the plexiglass windows of the meeting room. It's strict. 13. Keep an analog watch on your person at all times. If you ever feel that too little or too much time has passed since you entered the building, consult it rather than your phone or the clock on the computer. Whatever it says is correct. We look forward to working with you. Welcome to the Night Library. I've had several experiences worth recounting, to say the least, but I felt like laying the foundation out there was a decent place to start. If you'd like to hear more, stick around. Thanks for reading. Until next time, I guess. Hey everybody, thanks for all the love on my first post. I was mostly just sharing it to get it out of my own head, but as long as you're interested, I'll keep the stories coming. I've got plenty. Today, I thought I'd tell you about Rule 2, which states that there is no pool in the library. If you haven't read the first installment, go check it out, or this one may not totally make sense. So I've been working at the Night Library for exactly 7 days, 4 shifts, but it was 1 week to the day since I'd been hired, and everything was going surprisingly smoothly. As any sane person would do, I had put the list of rules out of my mind, gathering that they were nothing more than a tactic to haze new employees. Assuming that I would have a leg up on them if I didn't acknowledge the list at all, I hadn't even mentioned it when I'd finished filling out my entry paperwork, simply slipped it into my locker and handed the rest in to Matt. Oh, I was asked about it, of course. Several times over the course of the following nights, various co-workers approached me to inquire as to whether anything had happened to me yet. When I asked what they meant, their response was always some variation of, you know, the rule, and I would just snort and roll my eyes and be on my way. On the evening of my 4th shift, I had stepped away from the little hole in the back office that Matt had set up as a book mending station for me and was briefly helping Jenny out. We were unusually swamped at the desk and Matt had taken off for the night, so I figured she could use a little extra manpower. We'd worked our way almost entirely through the line, and when the face of the last patron finally surfaced from the crowd, Jenny was still busy with someone else. So naturally it was me they looked to. "Hi," I said. "What can we do for you?" That was when I noticed their eyes. There wasn't anything wrong with them. Not technically. They were dark, but not unnaturally so. Not bloodshot. The pupils weren't abnormally large, but there was something behind them. No, let me try that again. There was nothing behind them. That was the problem. I looked away. "Pool," they said. I cleared my throat. "Sorry? Pool. Your pool. I need help finding it." I laughed and a cool air of relief washed over me. They looked soulless and creepy as hell on purpose, of course. Matt had put them up to this, or if not Matt, one of the other employees. "Sorry, buddy," I told them. "That's not gonna work on me." "Nice job though. You kind of freaked me out for a second." The patron said nothing, just ever so slightly furrowed their brow and tilted their head to the side as though they didn't understand what I was saying. "I need help finding your pool," they repeated. I leaned partway across the counter, lowering my voice so that Jenny wouldn't overhear. She seemed preoccupied enough, but you never quite know with her. "Look, dude, I don't want to spoil the fun for everyone else, so I'm gonna let them think they're pulling one over on me for a while, okay? But I'm not buying it. I'll walk away from the desk with you. but once we're out of the line of sight, you can drop the act. This seemed to satisfy them well enough, because they turned and began heading opposite my direction. I quickly ducked out from behind the counter to follow. We walked in silence until we were safely hidden in the stacks, and then I stopped, reaching out to place a hand on their shoulder. "All right, pal, I think we've made it far enough." They faced me, and I waited for the facade to fall away. It didn't. "Your pool," they recited once more. Slowly, a quiet unease began to creep up my spine. I managed. "Where is it?" For a moment, I considered. There was absolutely no way in hell any of this rules bullshit was real. But why were they so dedicated? "Is Matt paying you to do this?" They stared blankly back at me. The same, dead eyes as before, unblinking and cold. "Where?" they demanded icily. "Is your pool?" As little stock as I had put into the list, it had in its absurdity stuck with me in such a way that made it difficult not to recall near to every detail. "There is no pool in the library," I remembered reading, and then, "not in the basement, which doesn't exist." "It's in the basement?" I tried, fearing that the next query would be where the basement was located. But no more questions came. Instead, the patron nodded and left me alone between Stephen King and Leanne Moriarty.
I shouldn't have followed them.
For countless reasons I shouldn't have, but I needed to know what was going on. So I peeked around the edge of the shelf, ensuring that I'd given them enough leeway not to take notice of me trailing them. And then I set off. They were headed toward the children's area, which was entirely across the building from where we'd just been, and I was forced to keep my pace brisk so as not to lose sight of them. They bobbed and weaved in and out of my view, but I always managed to catch up just before it was too late. We traversed through the baskets of puzzles and blocks, along the dingy train mat thrown thoughtlessly across the largest expanse of open floor, and somewhere to my right, a read-along book that had been left open was stuck on a loop of animal sounds. We passed by the library's small collection of second-hand leapfrog learning pads and stepped over a spilled bin of well-worn stuffed animals, me keeping as quiet as I could all the while. Finally, we reached the rear wall, and I saw something I'd never noticed before. There was a door. Nothing about it was special or notable in the slightest. It was a metal rectangle that had been painted the same deep flat shade of blue as the building's exterior doors, and it was fitted with an identical window so high up I would have needed a ladder to see what lay beyond. As was the only logical next event in our sequence, the patron approached it and turned the handle, which opened to them fluidly and without issue. Half of me hoped it would do the same when it was my turn. Half hoped it wouldn't. The door wasn't loud. I wasn't particularly concerned that they'd hear me breach it once it had fallen closed behind them, but just to be safe, I counted off 10 Mississippis before easing it open and slipping inside. Immediately I was immersed in darkness. It would have been total had it not been for the dim glow permeating through from the bottom of the set of descending steps before me. My brain, scrambling to compute, insisted that the lack of a basement in the building must have been part of the elaborate ploy. The fact that I'd never noticed the door didn't mean it didn't exist. Clearly it did, as I'd just used it. I'd only been here a week. It wasn't like I'd had a chance to explore every cubic inch of the place. Taking a steadying breath, I mentally chastised myself for being so gullible and started down the stairs. It took longer than I felt it should to reach the end. Far longer, but I chalked it up to anticipation and kept on until I reached a level, concrete platform. The only turn to make was a right one, so I took it, drawing steadily closer to the disembodied light source. I traveled down a narrow corridor, minding my step once I realized that the floor was covered in about 1/8 of an inch of water, just enough to result in a soft echoing splash if I swung my foot down with enough force. I didn't hear anything ahead of me, but the patron hadn't preceded me by much. They had to be fairly close. Soon, the hallway opened into what I understood to be the basement. Beams and pipes littered the ceiling in an impossible maze, and I found that the light I'd been following was produced by a single low-wattage bulb suspended from the rafters by a wire. I could see the center of the room clearly, but the edges blurred back into shadow. Straight ahead, I thought something shifted, but I couldn't be sure, considering that I was out in the open now with nowhere to hide. I called out a reluctant, "Hello?" No direct response came, but there was a quiet skittering from the same area where I thought I'd seen motion, so I moved toward it against my better judgment, squinting in attempt to make out a shape of any form. When I finally settled on one, it was the yawning black mouth of an entryway. Almost blindly, I felt my way forward and stuck my hand inside to be met with empty air. The basement was cooler than upstairs already, but as I stepped fully through, I estimated the temperature drop to be another 5 degrees at the very least. The water that had veiled the floor from the bottom of the stairs had never receded, but it grew a hair deeper here, just enough so that it began lapping at the canvas above the soles of my shoes. "Hello?" I asked again. Too unsure of my surroundings to go any further, I stood my ground and listened intently. This time I could swear I heard a faint splash. It's difficult to explain what happened next. It was as though a film of a sort lifted from the entirety of the premises, and with it, the darkness. Not like someone had flipped on a switch, more like opening a blackout curtain. That's when I realized that it was because something was emerging from underwater. Before I go into detail about that, let me set the scene for you. As soon as my environment was illuminated, my heart gained sentience and decided there was no time like the present to explore the outside of my chest. I was the origin of freeze being tacked onto the old fight or flight adage, but once I'd thawed, I took a liberal stumbling step backward, so close to the space my toes had just inhabited that I'd have been done for had I allowed myself so much as a readjustment. There was a pool, or rather, a pit full of water. So dark and deep it appeared bottomless. Something about it affected my perception of the rest of the space. It was so all-encompassing that everything around it seemed to be pulling toward it as though it was the center of gravity, dizzying and cloying. Thankfully, however, my focus was instantaneously directed elsewhere. Have you seen an anglerfish? I assume you have, but if not, take a second to Google it. What had arisen from the depths of the pool pond liquid grave greatly resembled one in several respects. The most notable being the giant pulsating bulb protruding from the center of its head and dangling in such a way as to perfectly illuminate the second most notable feature, the teeth. The most prominent difference between the thing before me and a traditional anglerfish was the size. For example, a fully grown anglerfish generally reaches the length of a ruler, but has on rare occasion been known to scarcely outgrow a yardstick. A yardstick may have been a match for a single dagger-like protrusion jutting like a stalagmite from this creature's jaw. I ran, slipping along the damp floor and barely catching myself on the walls several times before finally finding myself in the stairwell again. I began ascending it with all the force and swiftness in my being. They say the drive home always feels short, and this was apparently applicable to the trip up the stairs from the gate to hell. This is down the stairs to it as well, because it felt as though not a second had passed before I was shoving the door open and collapsing onto the carpeted ground outside to catch my breath. When I got my bearings and stood, glancing quickly over my shoulder to be sure I hadn't inadvertently invited anything to accompany me out of the basement, I felt my stomach plummet. The door was gone. I looked insane by the time I made it back to the desk, and Jenny wasn't shy about telling me so. "What happened to you?" she asked. "Did somebody waterboard you, or is that sweat?" "I saw it," I told her. "The pool." She cocked one brow, eyes minutely widening. "Welcome to the club, noob. Get out of here. They'll see you tomorrow."
I got out.
Needless to say, I started studying that list like gospel the next night and never questioned it again. It's saved my ass a fair few times now, as it has everyone's here. And before you ask why I don't quit, why any of us done'ts, I have to admit that I don't have a solid answer for you. The money is definitely part of it. Matt knows what he's doing, buttering us up, giving us incentive not to seek out alternative employment. He keeps the staff small and cuts corners pretty much anywhere else he can, so he's able to pay us what he does. But there's something else too, something too intangible to verbalize. And it's unspoken between the lot of us that the sensation is mutual. We're just supposed to be here. Besides, I don't know if the library would take too kindly to us leaving. If there's anything specific you'd like to hear about next, drop a comment and I'll try to get on it ASAP. Otherwise, I'll be back with the next story that comes to mind. In a place as unique as the night library, there are bound to occasionally be hazards to the general public. Our rules, read about them here if you're just stumbling across this series, are only given to staff. We don't attach a copy to every patron registration form we hand out for a multitude of reasons. And I think I can speak for all of us when I say the most prominent of those is that we simply don't need to. Sure, there's the fact that no one would believe the rules in the first place, or that if they did, it would likely incite mass panic. But we haven't really come across either of those issues in a serious capacity, because the rules generally seem to only regard our staff, Something about signing off on a job offer here commits us to the library in a way that means we're no longer blind to what's going on behind the curtain, so to speak. I've tried to ask Matt if he knows why that is on plenty of occasions, but he's pretty dodgy about it, so I've come to terms with the idea of never getting an answer. It's just the way things are. As long as our patrons aren't affected, the technicalities don't really matter. However, as with any rule, there are exceptions. The particular exception that brought about today's story is what I like to refer to as the revival clause. I learnt about it in an innocent enough way. We have a regular patron named Doris, or Dory if you're familiar with her, which we all are, who Matt pointed out to me within my first few months of work. "See her?" he asked one night, tapping my shoulder with his knuckle to get my attention. I was checking in a stack of books I just brought back to the desk from being mended, and I raised my head, following his line of sight to the front door, where a woman was entering in a wheelchair, an oxygen mask secured to her face. I nodded a confirmation. "Keep an eye on her," he told me. "If you see anything today, or if anybody does, so does she. She's a special case. Try to make sure nothing happens." I furrowed my brow, confused. "What do you mean? Did she used to work here or something?" Matt shook his head, chewing on the inside of his cheek. "No. She had a heart attack last year that, it killed her. Clinically. They were able to bring her back after a minute or so, but it changed something." I set my books down, turning to face Matt. Changed something how? We hadn't seen her in a few months. We knew something had to be wrong. Her health's always been bad, so we thought life had finally just given up on her. But then she came back, told us what had happened. We didn't think anything of it at first, and then one Saturday she was on her way out and started screaming. I ran up to the vestibule, and there was Della, mopping the floors, with, her cleaning solution. I supplied, confused. "Yeah," Matt cleared his throat. "So when Dory went into hysterics about all that blood, I knew something wasn't right. I blinked. Wait a minute. Are you saying it doesn't look like that to everyone? I thought that was one of the normal rules, like the Windex thing, or the parking lot. Does that mean it is blood? Is it blood, Matt?" For a moment, Matt was quiet. "I guess you were gonna find out eventually," he said, voice gruff. I could feel that my eyes were wide, but I wasn't quite sure how to remind them that they didn't operate on a hand crank. "Where the hell does it come from?" I stage whispered. And then when a second, arguably more horrific thought came to mind. "Why is she mopping our floors with it?" Matt waved a hand dismissively. "Not issues you need to concern yourself with. I'm gonna step out for a smoke. Just watch her." Now, when I said my introduction to the revival clause was innocent, I meant that it consisted of nothing more than a conversation. I was mildly traumatized, sure, but nothing happened to Dory that day as a result of it. However, that doesn't mean it's never caused anyone harm. Last year, as I was in the back reattaching a book's hinge, Wiley knocked on the doorframe of my office, for lack of a better term. "Hey," they said, "just wanted to give you a heads up that La Mujer de Luto is here, so stay out of non-fic tonight." I wiped the binding glue off my fingers onto a cloth and swiveled my chair around. "Sounds good. Everybody okay?" "Yeah. Hugo already left for the night, so I think it's just me, you and Matt here. I'm working on installing some new barcode scanners and then I'm heading out too." "Cool," I said. "Thanks for letting me know." They offered me a two-fingered salute as they departed. I'd seen her before, the morning woman. The situation had only ever progressed as far as offering my sympathy. She had never beckoned me over to her or tried to follow me. So aside from feeling slightly on edge, I wasn't greatly impeded upon by Wiley's warning. I simply hollered over my shoulder for Matt to let me know if he needed help on Cirque and kept working. Hours passed. Several, so many that I'd mostly forgotten to be on alert by the time I made my way out of my cave and set off into the stacks. Still just aware enough not to venture into non-fiction. I was shelving some Douglas Adams books I'd just finished repairing. I'd seriously debated trying to contact Macmillan to ask if they can please find some way to carry out their personal vendetta against the guy, besides binding every one of his novels like dog shit. And I distinctly felt eyes boring into the back of my head. When I spun around to discover who they belonged to, I was met with a girl. I instantly recognized her, although I didn't know her by name. She frequented the library during the week and had mentioned to me before that she liked to come in after she got off work at the hospital to decompress. "Oh hey, I didn't hear you come up behind me," I told her. "What can I do for you?" She took a step toward me, The motion was jerky, as though she was reluctant, and it encouraged her thick, pen-straight hair to envelop her brown shoulders like a curtain. She mumbled something too low for me to hear. "In sorry," I said. "I didn't catch that." One of her arms gripped the other, and it looked like she was trying to hold herself still. Again, she mumbled something unintelligible under her breath. "Are you all right?" I asked. This time, when she spoke, I heard her. "Uno para la tristeza." Unease began a slow creep over me. I don't speak Spanish," I said. This had never come up in conversation between us before, given that she had never spoken Spanish to me. But I attempted to hold on to hope that she had some reason unbeknownst to me to believe that I might. "Uno para la tristeza," she repeated. "Dos para la alegría." Are you counting something? It was true that I didn't speak Spanish, but I'd taken a couple of semesters of it in high school and paid enough attention to pick up on the most basic words and phrases. But 1 for and 2 for what? At the speed of 02 dial-up, my brain allowed a memory to filter through. "Tristeza," my freshman Spanish teacher had said, contorting his mouth into an overly dramatic frown. My little trick for remembering this word is that it sounds like trist, which is something people are often sad to find that their partners are having behind their backs. Tristeza, sadness, sorrow. Uno para la tristeza, 1 for sorrow. On autopilot, though I hadn't heard it in probably 2 decades, my mind filled in the next line of the old Magpie nursery rhyme. 2 for joy. The girl stood before me, trembling, waiting. 3 for a girl, I continued aloud, though every fiber of my being was sounding alarms against my doing so. Desperately, she reached out to me. 4 para un niño, she recited. I took her hand in both of mine. 5 for silver, 6 para el oro. 7 for a secret, I finished. Never to be told. Do you know my secret, Adam? Instantly, I went cold. That I did know. I did. You've died before, I guessed. Haven't you? The girl slumped, an expression of relieved surrender overtaking her. Her eyes began to well with blood. No. I held fast to her wrist. No. No. Stay with me. Do not move, okay? Don't move. Matt, I have to go now, she said. I have to go with her. Matt? It was too late. Before Matt would have had so much as a chance to intervene. The morning woman was there, blocking the exit directly next to us at the end of the row. The veil that typically shrouded her face consisted of thin, loose-knit lace, which only clearly exposed her eyes, but it was lifted now, and her cheeks were streaked with dried, brown-red trails, lashes matted and heavy. Necrosis had eaten holes through her lips, and her long, yellowed teeth peeked through in several places, spittle stringing between them as her swollen tongue parted them to speak. "Vienes," she rasped, raising one gnarled, crooked finger to the girl's chest. The girl strained against my grip, releasing a shuddering sob. "Come on," I said, tugging desperately at her arm. "This way." She didn't budge. It was as though her feet were cemented to the floor. "It's okay," she told me. "Let go." I refused, clamping down even tighter. La Mujer de Luto glided toward me and I sucked a breath in, squeezing my eyelids shut and stifling a gag at the scent of her putrid flesh. The last thing I felt before losing consciousness was the brush of her ice-cold, ragged nails against my forehead. When I came to, I was lying on the floor in the break room. Matt was standing at the counter pouring coffee into his signature mug. World's best grandma. He found it in a cabinet when he bought the building, and when he saw that I was awake, he held it up to me in a cheers motion. "Hey, slugger," he said. "How you feeling?" I pushed myself up onto my elbows and assessed. My head was pounding, my mouth incredibly dry, but otherwise I wasn't much worse for wear. "Okay," I answered. "Okay," he echoed. "Gonna quit on me?" I blew a huff of laughter out my nose. "Nah, I don't think so." "Good. Then go home. He'll see you tomorrow night." Over the following weeks, missing posters began cropping up around town. They depicted the girl from the library, of course. Her name was Mina Alcalde. She was a 23-year-old medical student at the local university. Her parents' contact information was listed below her photograph, as well as a sizable reward for her safe return. Every time I saw one, my stomach flipped. I debated calling them on several occasions just to try and offer them some kind of closure. But what could I have said? "Stop looking for your daughter. She's been taken by what I'd guess is probably the spirit of a dead woman to God knows where, and she's never coming back." So I never did. The months passed and eventually the posters became fewer and further between. But I never forgot her face. To this day, damn near every time I close my eyes, I see hers glazing over with blood. I hear her silently pleading with me both to help her and to set her free. I try to tell myself it wasn't my fault, that these things are never in our control. But on the worst nights, when I can't sleep without her watery voice resonating throughout my entire head, begging me to let the morning woman take her, I wonder if there was something more I could have done. I wonder if I could have saved her. As unbelievable as it sounds, it was literally a dark and stormy night, and also a Friday the 13th, in October, under a full moon. Nah, I'm just kidding. It really was storming though. But it was late spring, and the rain was nice and light and even a little unseasonably warm. Kind of made for the perfect cozy library aesthetic atmosphere, if you're into that sort of thing. I was pretty well caught up on the books that needed repairing for the moment. So our cataloger Alice had asked me if I had time to pull a list of materials for her that she had accidentally only saved brief records for. Nothing out of the ordinary had gone on so far during the evening. It had been quiet, mostly. We'd signed up a couple of new patrons, which by the way you can do online now since it's been so highly requested. Here's the link. And helped an elderly couple print out some shipping labels earlier in the shift. But basically everyone had cleared out by midnight. I was pulling from near the section Horace was shelving in, and we were making idle conversation, by which I mean I was talking at him and he was grunting in response. But in the midst of a sentence I stopped. Above us, something had cut me off. Thump. Screech. Thump. What the? Horace, did you hear that? Hear what? Horace asked absently, eyes still locked mechanically on the task before him. Upstairs, I insisted. I swear to God something just thump, screech, thump. That, you had to hear that. Slowly Horace looked up at me. I'd never seen an expression on his face quite like the one he wore in that moment. It conveyed a litany of emotions ranging from fear to frustration to desperation. And he shook his head in a singular, pointed motion. No, he said. No. I didn't hear anything, neither did you. And if you did, it's just the ducks. But, no Adam, he pleaded. There's nothing up there. You know that. Just ignore it. Okay. I conceded. Sorry. You're right, I know. The sound didn't stop for at least half an hour. If anything, it grew louder and more persistent, though that may have just been my brain's progressive inability to block it out. But I did my best, and eventually it did cease. Once we had 10 or so minutes of consistent quiet, Horace's giant shoulders visibly relaxed. Do you have anything coming out of repair that needs to be shelved? He asked me. No, I said. You've gotten them all, I think. Then I'm going home. I'll see you tomorrow. See you then. I agreed. He left. Once I'd finished pulling Alice's books, there were a lot. I probably looked like a grandfather, the way I had to inch the cart across the floor. I took them back to her desk, playfully bumping into the back of her wheelchair with the truck. In filing for workers' comp, she threatened, not bothering to turn around. Thanks, nerd. Anytime, I told her. Except when I have something better to do. She still didn't turn, just leaned her head back so far it looked like she was being exercised. Did you hear the ruckus? She asked, gesturing with a glance to the ceiling. Up there was a step stool tucked behind the filing cabinet next to me, and I pulled it out, sitting down atop it and scooting it closer to her. Okay. Yes, I whispered, although to my knowledge there was no one else in the back office. But Horace wouldn't talk about it, which I know is a rule, that there's nothing upstairs or whatever. But there obviously is. Alice finished. Yeah, sounded pretty fucky, whatever it was. Have you ever been up there? I asked. Nah. Alice righted herself, pushing off one side of her desk and then the other to swivel her chair back and forth. This bad boy can climb a set of stairs like a champ, but it's not too quick on the uptake, and I'm not willing to gamble on how fast I could make it back down if something was after me. Besides, personal code of conduct is to leave well enough alone in this place. Maybe that's why it's easier for me to talk about it all, 'cause I'm just guessing at what's going on.
Wait, all of it? You've never seen anything?
Nothing, Alice clarified. But not much. I've never seen the pool or gone upstairs or tried to figure out any of the mystery keys that just appear on the rings sometimes. Nothing avoidable. I've been here a long time, almost as long as Matt. He's done a lot to protect me. I mean, he does whatever he can to keep us all safe, obviously. But when I started here, it was just the two of us, and there was a lot he was still figuring out, which meant it was especially dangerous. If some new weird shit came up, Matt explored it, alone. A lot of times that meant he got hurt, but I never did. And that was 100% thanks to him. So it would just kind of feel like slapping him in the face not to take any precaution he offered me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I said, yeah, that makes sense.
Thump. Screech. Thump. The sound emanated from above us once again, but this time it was immediately followed by something else. A paralyzing, gut-wrenching scream. I jumped. Alice did too. Hand to her chest. Jesus H, she breathed. Where's Matt? Is he still here? I don't know, I managed. I think so, somewhere. Is it not something you've ever heard before? No, Alice admitted, leaning down to unlock her chair's brake. I'm gonna go look for him. You just don't do anything stupid. Now, I'm not sure if you've gathered yet from the first couple entries of this series, but telling me not to do anything stupid is kind of like taking a salt shaker to a slug and telling it not to die. In my defense, I'm almost never just charging straight at something I know might get me maimed or killed without a decent enough reason that I deem the odds acceptable. And in this situation, I genuinely did intend to keep myself planted firmly on the step stool and wait for Alice to return, hopefully with Matt in tow. But then the sound came again, and following it, another scream. This one broke off into a sob, and directly afterward, the first audible words. Help! Can anyone hear me? Please help me. I froze and listened and waited. Thump. Screech. Thump. Please, God, please. Somebody help me, it's... Screech. Silence. Quieter than dead air. The absence of sound. My own breathing, quick and shallow, was the only noise that existed. There was no electricity humming, no air flowing through the vents, absolutely nothing. That somehow was worse than the screaming. It was an infinitely less alive sound, which made it infinitely more chilling, and I physically could not sit idly with it in anticipation. So, I got up. Should it have been to look for Alice and Matt? Probably, yes. But there's something about a certain level of adrenaline that impairs logic and reason. So, what did I do? You guessed it. I'd been in our mechanical room plenty of times before. That's where we store donated books until Alice can get them to catalog them, and it's also where Della keeps her cleaning supplies, which we all need access to from time to time. But I'd never gone up the stairs. First time for everything, is what I figured it. I wasn't sure if I wanted to make my presence known or not, so I kept my mouth shut, tiptoeing up each step and making sure not to scuff my shoes along the grip on the edges. It felt like it took ages to reach the top, as cautious as I was being. But I got there eventually, and when I did, I didn't see anything. I mean, I could see. The lights were on if dim. Some of them looked as though they meant to be fluorescing but had burned out at some point in the likely distant past. But nothing appeared to be amiss. There were totes and boxes stacked precariously atop one another in the center of the floor, and to the sides were all the HVAC machines, their green sensors tinting the room in a strange hue. Tentatively, I made a lap around the perimeter. Nothing stirred. Nothing made a peep. I knew, rationally, that I should cut my losses, or my wins, depending on how you look at it, and get back to the safety of the office before anything had a chance to rear its ugly head. But I also knew what I'd heard, and I wasn't about to be gaslit by whatever had lured me up there in the first place. There was nowhere to hide on the outskirts, but I sized up the mound of miscellaneous objects in the middle of the floor. There could be something under the boxes. In them, maybe. I walked slowly over, taking a breath to steel myself, and towed the outer edge of the pyramid, jumping reflexively back in anticipation. But I didn't need to, it seemed. I apparently hadn't upset the balance. The mound remained intact and undisturbed. Feeling slightly braver, I stepped forward and kicked it again, this time with enough force to rattle it all the way to the top, but not so much as to knock anything over. Still, once it had settled, nothing emerged. Something did, however, fall from the fucking ceiling. If you've ever seen a horror movie where the big bad creepy crawly is loose above the protagonist's head and wished you could scream at them to just look up already, rest assured that I have too. You probably tell yourself that you'd never be so oblivious or unobservant, that you would check every inch of your surroundings, overhead included, and possibly prioritized. I know, because I always told myself the same. The thing is, In real-life scenarios, you just don't anticipate an animatronic velociraptor pterodactyl hybrid swooping down and entrapping you in its enormous, goo-covered wings. Reading that back, it sounds kind of hilarious. So for the sake of the atmosphere, just understand that it absolutely was not. I'd barely caught a glimpse of it before I was completely enveloped in warm, sticky blackness. But what little I had seen was nearly enough to send me straight out of consciousness. I knew if I was going to, not pass out, I needed to slow my breathing, stop thrashing fruitlessly around, and gather whatever information I possibly could from my current position. Its grip on me was tight, but not so much so that I felt suffocated, which gave me a glimmer of hope that perhaps whatever it was, it didn't plan to constrict me to death. I was crushed against its body, which my cheek registered as hot metal of some sort. But when I wiggled my fingertips against what I could reach of its wings, they felt leathery and soft, almost like a tanned cow's hide. Quickly, I learnt the source of the thumping and screeching that had given the thing away. Every step it took, jostling me from side to side, resulted in a resounding thud, and between each footfall, its tail scraped tinnily across the concrete floor. I wanted to cover my ears, but my arms were pinned to my sides, so I settled for gritting my teeth instead. We made several passes back and forth from one end of the room to the other, and I realized at some point that it was beginning to grow agitated. It was huffing great breaths out its nose, stomping harder and harder, swinging its tail more and more frenetically. I was still far too shaken to use rational thought, no matter how hard I tried. But I did eventually come to surmise that it may have been angry it couldn't fly while holding me captive. So, I did the only thing I could. I waited it out. I was, of course, desperately wondering where Matt was. Maybe he'd left without telling us, I reckoned. And Alice hadn't been able to find him after all. Maybe she'd tried to call him and he hadn't answered. So she'd had no choice but to leave me to my own devices. She certainly shouldn't risk coming to look for me alone if there was a chance she wouldn't be able to get away quickly enough to save herself. The mechanical dinosaur bird dragged me over the length of the space for what could have been minutes or hours or days for all I knew. And by the time it finally slowed to a stop, I felt delirious. The wet, slowing sound its wings made as it unwound them from around my body made my stomach turn. And just as I tried to remind myself to be grateful that at least the slime coating me from head to toe was odorless, the thing opened its mouth. The stench that emanated from it was unlike anything I had or have to this day honestly ever experienced. It was worse than death, worse than rot, worse than decay, worse than a combination of every disgusting aroma I'd ever been subjected to at once. It knocked me flat on my ass, which turned out to be a damn shame for me, because once I'd landed, I couldn't unglue myself from the floor. I was forced to take in its full form now, and my brain refused to process any of what it was seeing, catapulting me instantly into a state of derealization. It had to be at least 7 feet tall, with a wingspan twice as long, and I could see clearly that the bronze making up its abdomen, head, and legs had begun to oxidize, giving the effect of flaking skin. Its wings resembled bats' wings, and as it stretched them, each individual vein they contained was exposed by the light behind them. It was just going to eat me right there. I was fairly sure of that now, even as badly as it had clearly wanted to savor me on the ceiling instead, for which there was a reason. But that's, well, another story for another time. It craned its long neck down, reminiscent of that of a large desk lamps, and stopped short only inches from my face. Its mouth was still open, but what I saw inside gave me pause. It was another beak. This one was smaller, but it was behind the creature's jagged teeth, in the place where I would have expected to see a uvula in a human. Slowly, it began to creak open as well. Past its exterior, I could barely make out what looked to be a small round speaker, the type that might have been found in an old-school intercom system. To my horror, it began to crackle to life. "Help," it pleaded, deafeningly loud. "Can anyone hear me?" I felt my blood turn to ice as it began to scream, and scream, and scream. It was taunting me. That was all there was to it. It was solidifying what I'd really already known. There had never been a person in danger. It had cast its hook, and I'd taken the bait. Its viscous, stringy saliva dripped onto my head and shoulders, and I was entirely powerless to stop it. No matter how hard I fought to move, I clamped my teeth together, forcing back wave after wave of nausea. I'd always expected that. If I was of sound enough mind to be aware at my time of death, I would have at least one profound thought. But in that moment, nothing but pure white panic filled my mind. I was terrified, simply and truly. There was no room for anything else. A thin, black tongue rolled out of its mouth, the texture similar to a cat's, with sharp angled barbs pointing toward its throat. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't bring myself to, couldn't even close my eyes. I needed to fully experience the last moments of my life, whatever they might entail. I instinctually believed when I first heard the pop that the creature's head had exploded of its own volition. I couldn't quite see what was going on, as I was too busy blinking blood. At least, that's what I assume it was out of my eyes. But then there was silence save for the sound of wires short-circuiting, and then Matt was speaking, as close to frantic as I'd ever heard him, yelling out imperatively that I respond if I could. My lips were covered in blood too, so I hummed in response, not willing to test what might happen if I were to accidentally ingest it.
Fuck,
Matt said when he reached me, kneeling and pulling the sleeve of his shirt down over his hand to wipe off my mouth and eyes. "Are you hurt?" he asked, and then amended. "Bad?" I coughed, shaking my head. "No, I'm fine, just stuck." "What did you do?" "Shot the bastard," he told me, unsheathing the knife hooked to his belt and beginning to work at the goo cementing me to the floor. Sometimes the solution's easier than you expect. Once he cut me out of confinement, he helped me to my feet, giving me a good once-over to make sure I hadn't sustained any injuries I was in too much shock to feel yet. This was a particularly easy feat, given that if any of my own blood had been displaced, it would have been red, contrasting starkly with the muddied green of the monsters. "Thanks," I said. Thanks. "Don't come up here again," he told me. "The rules exist for a reason." "I know. I'm sorry. I just thought someone was in trouble." "If you ever think someone's in trouble, come find me. They'll handle it." We trudged back downstairs, my feet squelching every time they made contact with the ground. I didn't ask if Matt had a plan for the creature's body. I didn't ask if he'd known how to kill it because he'd run into one before. I didn't ask if I was fired. Back at the desk, Alice told me she wanted to punch me, but it wasn't worth getting that nasty shit all over her hand, which I thought was fair on both accounts. She also told me it had taken her a while to track Matt down. He'd been outside in the storage shed, and then reminded Matt that she had explicitly instructed me not to do anything stupid while she was gone, which I corroborated. If anyone was going to be in trouble, it had better be me, but I wasn't. Matt sent me home to clean myself up and get some rest, both of which I did. When I showed up for work the next night, it was as though nothing had ever happened. We never spoke of it. I fully intended after that night to heed Matt's warning to never set foot upstairs again. Truly, I did. And I did heed it. Until about a week ago. But I think I've given you enough to digest for now, and there's something to the belief that you shouldn't pry at a fresh cut. So, maybe another time. It had been a bad night. We have those here, as you know. Unless you don't know, in which case you should start from the beginning. Or if you just missed my last post about the green-blooded prehistoric animatronic monstrosity, here's that one. Anyway, we're prone to bad nights. But this was a bad night. Wiley had accidentally unlocked a door, Rule 5, had been incapacitated by the coffee pot, Rule 8. He'll elaborate on this one eventually, and we'd been hit with a midwinter blizzard that had knocked the power out cold. We had a generator running to do things like keep us from freezing to death while we were snowed into the building, and as I've mentioned before, we're so used to losing power that we've got a whole system for checking people in and out offline, that there's just something extra eerie about the place with nothing but the dingy emergency lights on. I'm not afraid of the dark, but I'm not a complete numbskull either, so I am afraid of the library when I ought to be, and that night was teeming with reasons. It was just the three of us, me, Wiley, and Matt, all huddled behind the circulation desk together. There weren't any patrons coming in, because nobody could get out of their houses, and although there was plenty we technically could have kept busy with, we come to an unspoken agreement that splitting up would be B-movie stupid. So there was nothing left for us to do but wait it out and talk. Matt isn't a particularly conversational guy unless he's in the right mood to be, but I guess that night had been enough to bring it out of him. The borderline functional alcoholism too. That's borderline alcoholism, not borderline functional. I'd never seen him drink on the job before, but there was no way we see a single other person before we made it out of there, so it didn't really matter. Also his establishment, his business, above my pay grade to question. He wasn't drunk yet, but he'd been nursing a tumbler of bourbon for the better part of the night, and he was clearly a little less inhibited than usual. "This fucking place," he muttered, raising his glass to me in question. I shook my head. I don't drink, which Matt knows and knew then, but it was the only solace he had to offer in the moment. "Do you think it'll always be worth it?" I asked him, keeping it open. Wiley tried to swipe Matt's glass while he wasn't watching, earning them a swat to the back of the head. I'm fairly sure they were of the legal drinking age, but Matt's always looked at them way too much like his kid to be cool with instilling any bad habits in them. "I don't know if it's ever been worth it," he admitted, "but it's my responsibility now." I stood from my seat, pushing myself up onto the desk so that I'd be fully facing him. "What do you mean now?" Matt hesitated. "Jesus, I need a smoke," he sighed. "It's complicated. This building can just fall into anybody's lap. The man who owned it before me, he didn't run it as a library, but he did run it with the same understanding of it that we have today. Before I took it over, it was a dry cleaner's." "So close," I muttered under my breath. "What?" "Oh, nothing. I just thought it was probably a laundromat, 'cause never mind. Go on." Matt went on. "His name was John Hiroski. He and his father migrated here from Osaka when he was in his teens, after his mother passed away, and his father bought it from a commercial real estate agency for next to nothing. There wasn't anything wrong with it fundamentally. No issues with the foundation, nothing electrical, nothing the inspectors could find. He knew it didn't make sense that they were selling it so cheap, but he just chalked it up to wanting it out of their hair. It wasn't being used for anything at the time, which meant it was easy enough to renovate, and the Hiroskis had run a dry cleaning service back in Japan, so they knew what they were doing. Made a decent living pretty quick. Everything was going smoothly at first. They were adjusting well, fitting into the community. Jung was in his sophomore year of high school, so unsurprisingly there was some racist bullshit to be had, but for the most part, it was pretty smooth sailing. He made some friends, met a girl, graduated, married her. Matt paused, knocking back the last of his current drink and refilling his glass halfway. They started trying for kids about 5 years later, but it never took. They both had all the tests run, and the doctors said everything seemed to be in working order. My opinion, the universe was looking out for some poor sucker who would have inherited this place one day. "So wait, how did you end up with it?" Wiley asked. "How'd you even meet? You don't seem like the kind of guy who's ever had something dry cleaned." Matt lazily held up a hand, signaling that Wiley wait. "You'll get there," he said. Anyway, not only could they not get pregnant, but around that same time, Jung found out his father was sick. Cancer. It had spread to his lymph nodes before they'd caught it, and it was so aggressive that none of the oncologists they spoke to recommended that they even try treatment. They said it would just cause him more pain, put his body under more stress. Obviously, Jung and his wife put the idea of starting a family on the back burner. His father declined alarmingly quickly, and one evening he called Jung to his bedside for a talk about the business, of all things. Jung tried to tell him it wasn't important, that he would handle all the technicalities himself when the time came, but his father was insistent. There were things Jung didn't know, he said, things he had to be prepared for. Jung had spent his fair share of time in the shop, especially in the few years since he graduated high school, but not nearly to the capacity that his father had, and not ever alone. His father made sure of that. The largest difference between then and now is that their hours of operation were typical for a business. They were open during the day, 9 to 7 through the week, 9 to 5 on the weekends. Things are calmer during the day. Wiley can attest to that. Yeah? Oh, yeah, Wiley agreed. I mean, it's not like everything just stops, but it's a whole lot different. If you'd only ever been here during the day, you could totally write everything off as something innocent. Exactly, Matt concurred. So, having never been inside past closing time, Jung didn't know to be weary. And the most dangerous thing you can do in this building is be oblivious to it. His father had to be sure that he was ready for what was to come. So Jung sat down at his father's bedside, and his father began to tell him a story. One that Jung eventually told me. It went like this. Once upon a time, there was an herbalist. She worked quietly and discreetly from her home for many years, but eventually her clientele grew so large that she'd outgrown her small space and sought out a local landowner for an opportunity to lease a property from him. He had just one open, he told her, but she was welcome to it if she could pay the price. She was shocked. She'd expected protest, if not flat-out refusal. It was far past the age of true witch trials, but still, men didn't tend to take too kindly to women in medicine. not to mention ones who open their own honest businesses to practice it. But he was wholly uninterested in her operations as long as they brought in money each month. So she signed the contract on the spot, and that was it. The building was hers. A fair few years passed and all went swimmingly. The woman never married, nor did she bear children. But she was successful and fruitful, and a pillar of her community. She healed the sick, soothed the restless, and helped those on their way out of this life through to the other side. Until the unthinkable happened. Of course, health is fickle. There were plenty of occasions on which she was unable to cure an ailment. But this was different. One evening, a mother bustled into the apothecary, holding her son to her chest. He was wrapped in a blanket, and the herbalist expected to see an infant. But when his mother lay him down on the work table in the shop, she saw that he was a young boy, perhaps 5 or 6 years old. "What troubles him?" the herbalist asked, rushing to his side. "A fever," the boy's mother replied. "I've bathed him in ice, kept him from food, given him plenty of water. Nothing will bring it down. Please, help him." "Of course," said the herbalist. "A bit of willow tincture and he should be good as new." The boy's mother gripped the herbalist's hand. "Thank you," she said. "I haven't much, but I'll pay what I can." The herbalist waved her off. "I won't hear of it," she insisted. "The work is payment enough." Once she had fetched the tincture, she turned the boy onto his back and wet his lips with a sponge to encourage them to part. He wasn't conscious that his frail body complied, his tongue darting out to catch the moisture. "Very good," the herbalist encouraged, though she was sure the boy couldn't hear her. Swiftly, she unscrewed the tincture's dropper cap and squeezed the top to fill the syringe, lifting it to the boy's open mouth and releasing it at a gradual but steady pace. "Is that it?" his mother asked after a moment. "It is," the herbalist confirmed. "He should wake improved in a couple of hours. If his fever rises again, bring him back to me." The mother and son took their leave. They had only been gone less than an hour. However, when they returned, the mother frantic, the boy convulsing in her arms, Matt shook himself out of the retelling, eyes downcast, and chugged down another few fingers of bourbon. "Well," he said, "you can probably gather the rest. Anyway, turned out the son was deathly allergic to salicin, which is the active ingredient in willow bark. Killed him as soon as it set in." "Shit," Wiley whispered, fist pressed to their mouth. "Yay," Matt laughed humorlessly. "Shit." Now, the woman, his mother, didn't seek persecution against the herbalist. She was devastated, obviously, but she knew no intentional harm had been done. "How?" I asked. "Why didn't she think her son had been poisoned or something?" "Because," Matt explained, "the herbalist took some of the tincture in front of her to prove that nothing in it was toxic. And when that still wasn't enough to completely convince her, she asked to take some herself. Apparently, she said at least she'd be with her boy if it killed her, but it didn't, of course. And as fucked up as she was about the whole thing, she wasn't willing to cast blame where it wasn't due. But it was a village, a small one at that. Word traveled quickly, and soon there wasn't a person within earshot who didn't know the woman's son had died at the hands of the herbalist. So of course, she was ostracized from the community as a whole. Which meant what? No income, Wiley guessed. Matt shook a finger at them pointedly. That's right, no income. Nobody was paying or trading for her tinctures or balms or teas anymore, and there was only so much she could forage, especially in winter. She was on her way to starving to death quick, and Shed made her peace with that fact. In her eyes, it was her penance. She knew she hadn't killed the kid on purpose, but she still believed she deserved her suffering for taking the life of an innocent. So she resigned herself to her fate. But then, as the herbalist slept, she dreamed, and in her dream, there was a figure, tall and lean and shadowy black. It approached her as she was in reality, lying on her side in her bed, and brushed a lock of her fragile hair away from her ear. "I am the scorekeeper," it rasped, hot breath tickling her neck. "I was called to pay you a visit. Do you wish to settle a debt?" The herbalist watched her own unmoving body from above, well aware that she wasn't awake, but wishing still that she could communicate somehow, because she did wish to settle a debt, and she thought that maybe it would help her make peace with her passing if she said so, even to a dream. When the scorekeeper spoke again, she was startled at its words. "Worry not. What you mean to speak aloud, speak instead within your soul. I will understand." The herbalist wasn't sure if she believed this, but then again, it was a dream. Her dream. Why shouldn't it be able to read her thoughts? So, she opened her heart to the scorekeeper. letting the torment and turmoil and anguish of the death of the child overtake her spirit. So intensely she feared she may never reel it in. She agonized for the boy, for the unfairness of all the years she had inadvertently robbed him of, for the suffering she'd been entrusted to ease, for the hollow, empty life of his mother. She ached for what she had done, intentional or not. She felt as though whatever made her human, whatever made her her, might split in two. Enough, the scorekeeper said finally. I have what I need. My only question left for you is this. Are you willing to trade places with the boy? The herbalist, had she been asked beforehand, may have said she would have expected herself to need a moment to think, at least one. But when she said yes, it was with such instantaneous and absolute certainty that she knew without a shadow of a doubt that she meant it. And, evidently, so did the scorekeeper. You will have from sunrise until sunset to assure that your deal isn't for naught, it told her, wrapping its icy fingers around her wrist. The boy will need to be unburied if he isn't to suffocate when the exchange is made. Luck be with you. The herbalist woke. Dead, frost-bitten tissue encircled her arm. She knew what she had to do. Wait, I interrupted. So it was real? Did she literally go dig this kid up? Matt polished off his glass again. Yeah, he said. He just barely started decomposing, thankfully. Still totally intact. So she dug him out, wrote a letter to his mom, detailing everything that had happened, took him home in a wagon and left it outside the door. When she went to sleep that night, she didn't wake up. But he did. Wiley guessed. Bingo. Damn. A particularly strong gust of frigid wind howled past the windows, and I looked up to a confirmation that the snow didn't plan to ease anytime soon. Damn. I mean, this is, like, weird. Even for here. Even for us. A dead kid just coming back to life. I don't know, man. Matt shrugged his shoulders. Believe it or not, it happened. And the reason Jung's father told him the whole story was because it was about to happen again. See, he'd met the scorekeeper, and he was ready to make his own deal. He'd ended up eventually talking to the realtor who sold him the building, and he found out a thing or two about its prior tenants. Namely, nobody ever stayed. It took the right kind of person to put up with the goings-on here, and usually the people in commercial business when it had been sold to him for so little, he learned, because it had been vacant for so long that the company was about to cut their losses and have it bulldozed. Historical value be damned. Of course, all the realtors in the agency had started spreading their own little ghost stories, but they didn't know anything. Not really. The scorekeeper, as it turned out, only showed itself to the people who were contractually responsible for the building and who it knew it could proposition with a deal. So, when it approached Jung's father, it told him the story of the last deal it had made. What felt like lifetimes ago, well, showed him more like. When the scorekeeper got close enough, it put its hand on his forehead and projected its exchange with the herbalist almost like a movie into his mind's eye. That, and everything that had followed. Once a certain kind of sacrifice has been made in any given spot, something about it changes. The scorekeeper showed Jung's father the evolution of this place. The renovations and the partial demos and the reconstructions and all the nasty nightmarish shit that's been drawn here since the first time somebody willingly gave their life inside. When it was over, he knew what his own deal would be, and that he was going to take it. As long as his son complied with his ultimatum, what the scorekeeper offered him was a grandchild, one that he would never meet. His life in exchange for his son's ability to have a baby. He was dying already. But even if he hadn't been, he said he'd have taken it. All he asked in return was that Jung promised to get away, sell the building, leave the state, or hell, the country if he wanted to. Just go somewhere that the baby could never be exposed to this place. Jung still didn't believe it. Still thought his dad was just on the brink of death and delusional. But he agreed just to humor the old man, and that was that. Until he spent his first and only night here alone. I don't know exactly what happened, what he saw. I didn't ask, but I know he was here later than he ever had been running reports, and after whatever happened, he never set foot inside again. The next week, his father passed. The week after that, his wife got a positive pregnancy test. He listed the building the same day, had all the equipment cleared out, locks changed, the whole nine, and I just happened to be the first unlucky fucker looking for a spot. Before he signed the title over to me, he asked me a bunch of weird-ass questions. If I had a family, if I ever planned to, if anybody was dependent on me. Kept saying he didn't want to do this. that he wouldn't if he had any other choice, but he had to have the money. And then he told me everything. I thought he was off his rocker, of course, or just trying to fuck with me. I basically told him to stick it where the sun don't shine and gave him his check. Didn't take me long to realize I'd fucked up. He gave me his number when we met and told me to call if I had any questions, but warned me that the deal was final. I don't know what made me keep it, but I thank my lucky fucking stars every day that I did. He didn't have a lot of advice for me, seeing as how he hadn't actually experienced much of what went on firsthand, but at the very least he could assure me I wasn't on my last marble, and that was more comfort than I could have asked for at the time. He tried to talk me into just letting the place rot, but I knew I couldn't. Somebody would have come sniffing around eventually, and I'm not broke, but I'm not impervious to a high enough offer either, which I knew I'd get eventually if I just let it sit here. Believe it or not, I've got one or two morals, and they wouldn't let me pawn this bullshit off on anybody else. Jung's situation was different. If I'd been in his shoes, I would have done the same. He had a wife to look out for, and a baby, and a future. But I just had me, so I kept it. And now it's just like, people need this place, you know? So, here we are, and I've dragged you into it with me, because I don't know. Maybe I'm a pussy, or maybe I was lonely, or maybe I'm just a bad fucking person. But you don't leave. None of you ever leaves, even when it gets bad. And I think maybe that's because I do an okay job of keeping you safe. So, I'll keep at it as long as you will. And when we've all decided we can't take it anymore, then we'll reevaluate, I guess. Matt was beginning to slur a little now, and he took one last long drink before sliding his glass down the counter. We still talk from time to time. Jung pretends it's just to catch up, but he's really checking in, keeping tabs, making sure I haven't died. I ask him how the family is. He asks how work's going. I tell him everything's fine, and that's just understood code for I'm alive. We're all still alive. Feels like it ought to count for something. It does. Wiley's voice was slightly strained, and they cleared their throat, clapping a hand gently on Matt's shoulder. It counts for a lot. And hey, if we didn't want to be here, we wouldn't, okay? None of us. Right, Adam? Yeah. I agreed. Yeah, that's right. Hate to break it to you, but I think you're pretty well stuck with all of us at this point. The corner of Matt's lips tilted up. He blew a breath of laughter out his nose. Well, that's good to hear, he said, because one of these days the scorekeeper's coming for me. And when it does, when it's time to make my deal, it better be worth it. It better be for one of you. It was a Thursday night. The entire crew was working, which is rare, but happens every once in a while when we've been busy enough that we've all got something to do. I watched from my office as somebody struggled to open the front door, Jenny rushing out from behind the desk to help a second before the effort would have been wasted. She used her foot as a doorstop and ushered in a man who was precariously balancing a tall stack of large cardboard boxes in his arms. Ken just set them down right here on the desk. I heard Jenny telling him as they drew nearer. We sure appreciate it. The man eased the boxes down, straightening them to ensure that they wouldn't fall, and literally tipped his literal hat before turning to leave. Donations? I asked, poking my head around the corner. Yep, Jenny confirmed, popping her gum. Wanna help me take them to Alice? I obliged, hoisting a couple of the boxes off the counter and following Jenny's lead back toward the unmistakable sound of Alice's nails clicking against her keyboard. Presents, Jenny announced, dropping her boxes with a thunk and leaning back against the wall, arms crossed over her chest. Can we get a live unpackaging? Thank you, Alice said, accepting my boxes and placing them to her other side. Then to Jenny. Sure, but it'll probably be boring. They're heavy. That they're textbooks or something. This is the part in the movie where the narrator cuts in and is like, they were not fact textbooks. I wish a real-time narrator could have cut in right then and told us that. But apparently that's not how life works. So, we opened them. The first one, in all fairness, was unassuming. It was full of books on astrology, dreams, tarot reading, etc., etc. Very new age mysticism, which is popular enough that even with a collection as limited as ours, we have a small section for it. After that though, shit got weird. The next box also contained books, but they had no jackets and no titles, just identical leather binding. What the hell? Jenny said, leaning over Alice to pick one up. When she flipped it open, we were met with a cover page filled with someone's messy, inked scrawl. At first, I thought I couldn't decipher it just because the handwriting was such a wreck. But I quickly realized that, while they might resemble familiar letters, the markings on the page didn't belong anywhere in the English alphabet. I scanned the entire page, eyes looking to zero in on something they could make sense of. And just when I was about to call it quits, I landed on the very last line. By my mind and by my spirit, I read aloud. "The fuck is this?" Jenny snatched another book from the box and flipped back the cover to reveal a remarkably similar display to two of the one I held. Not identical. The penmanship didn't match perfectly, and a slightly smaller expanse of the page was taken up. But it was covered in the same symbols and ended in the same sign-off. "How many of them are there?" Alice sifted through them and then, after a moment, reported, 7, including those two. Upon closer inspection, we discovered that, while several of the tomes had what looked to be a few pages torn out in the front, they were mostly undisturbed. There was no writing or marking of any kind past the flyleaf. Reluctantly, given that there wasn't much else to explore without the ability to understand the glyphs, we set that box aside and moved on to the next. At first glance, it looked to be filled with swathes of fabric, but I realized when I made to pick one up that the fabric simply acted as a wrapping for various other objects. For example, once the red silk fell away, in my hand lay a muslin bag bearing a twine tie and a tag that read osteomancy. When I turned it over, something rattled inside. "Open it," Jenny urged. Something deep in the pit of my stomach told me I shouldn't. But Mama didn't raise no bitch or whatever. It is the kids are saying these days. So I did, and then because I am in fact a little bitch, I dropped it, which prompted the bones that had shocked me into letting it go to roll out and scatter over the desk. "Shit," Alice remarked, startled. "What the fuck is that?" "Rabbit," Jenny guessed confidently, and then defended. "What?" My dad hunted, when Alice glanced questioningly up at her. "Do we even want to know what else is in here?" I asked, swiftly gathering the bones and slipping them back into their sachet. Alice was already elbow deep in the box. She withdrew a parcel covered in black tulle and unrameled it to reveal a small wooden chest with a gold embossed label, Tassiomancy. Cautiously unhooking the latch, she swung the lid open to reveal a teacup. "Seriously? I get a dead animal and all you pull out is a teacup?" "With tea," Alice corrected, lifting a single-use tin of loose-leaf tea from inside the cup. "And it was hardly a dead animal." "Stop being dramatic. You're not even a vegetarian." I didn't technically have a counter, so I shut up. Alice placed the tea next to the bag of bones, and Jenny drew the next item from the box. This one, it was clear, was a set of playing cards. Only, instead of a brand or picture on the packaging, there was a single, printed word. Cartomance. When we pulled them out, we found that the cards themselves were entirely ordinary. I'm not sure what I expected, but there was nothing unusual about the suits or the colors or the imagery at all. "Boring," Jenny said, frowning. "Next." As it turned out, there was only one more thing to retrieve, which was surprising considering the amount of space it took up. It was a large silver case, with scrying etched across the lid in calligraphic scroll, and when I opened it up, there were several separate parcels wrapped in linen and cotton, and lace. The first was labeled Captromancy and contained a heavy, iron hand mirror, except the glass wasn't reflective, it was solid black. The next was Hydromancy, and inside was a black ceramic bowl along with a small glass jar of water, which some purple stones had settled to the bottom of. Then Pyromancy, 2 taper candles, one black, one white, with brass stands. Then Chiromancy and Chromancy, sealing wax and a pot of ink. And finally Spheromancy. Yes, as in a sphere, as in a crystal ball, except it didn't look like the ones in the movies, rather than being crystal. Ha, get it, clear. It was filled with cloudy, almost milky inclusions. Jenny whistled. "Holy balls, that is a chunk of quartz." This garner inquisitive brow raises from both Alice and myself, to which Jenny's response was, "My dad was into rockhounding too." "Get off my ass." "Only one left," Alice observed, nodding to the lone remaining untouched box. "Any guesses?" Jenny snorted. "What if it's just like something totally normal? Like, oh, here's all this occult shit, and also some cookbooks." "We all knew it wouldn't be cookbooks." Alice opened the box. At first I thought I was looking at a cutting board. It was just a giant slab of wood, so large it barely fit flush with the bottom of the box. But then I noticed something else in the corner. Alice did too, apparently, because she picked it up. "No way," she said, turning it over in her hand. "This is one of those things, isn't it? The pointer piece or whatever for a Ouija board." "Whoa." Jenny snatched it from her, tapping her nails against the small round window embedded in the wooden triangle. "Fancy. I expected plastic." "So wait, is that the board?" I asked, nodding toward the box. "Or is the board in that?" Alice reached in again, heaving the slab out and onto the desk before her. Sure enough, the face of a Ouija board stared back at us. Yes and no had been burned elegantly into the top corners. 2 rows of letters arched through the center, and a line of numbers hovered over the goodbye across the bottom. The only atypical aspect was that, rather than the typical Ouija branding front and center, the board's heading read "Lift the Veil." "I mean," Alice laughed, "we have to, right?" "Oh, def," Jenny agreed. "You in?" In, I conceded, because I'm a fucking idiot. I almost said in my defense, but no. There's really no defense for me. I should have known better. Did know better than to think anything that had a 0.01% chance of going wrong wouldn't in this place. Even something as laughable as playing with a Ouija board. We took it into the break room and set up at the table. Alice and I across from one another, and Jenny between us. Should we turn some of the lights off or something? Jenny wondered aloud. "It doesn't feel spooky enough." "I got it," I volunteered, crossing the floor to the panel of light switches next to the sink and flipping 2 of them off, leaving only the central tile illuminating the room. "Much better," Alice affirmed as I sat back down. "Okay, so what do we do? Just all touch the thing, right?" "Planchette," Jenny supplied. "My dad dated a medium." "Of course he did," Alice deadpanned. "Is that what we do then?" "Place 2 fingers on it," Jenny instructed. "Like this." The planchette was positioned in the center of the board, and Jenny lifted her right hand, resting the tips of her middle and pointer fingers against one of its edges. "Don't put any pressure on it. Do it like you're, I don't know, petting a baby animal or something." Alice and I swiftly followed her lead, my fingertips resting at the point. Alice is on the heart-shaped top. "Now what?" I asked. "Now, we just ask it questions," Jenny said, shrugging. "But not stupid questions. We have to ask, like, if there's anybody here that wants to communicate or whatever." "Okay." Alice took a breath and closed her eyes. I could tell she was trying to make herself take it seriously. "Is there anyone here who would like to speak with us?" To none of our disbelief, nothing happened. We waited several moments just to be sure, and then I tried. "If anybody has something to say, you're welcome to use this board to say it." I counted the rhythmic beats of my heart in the silence. 1 beat, 2 beats, 10. Nothing. "We're trying to give you a platform here," Jenny reasoned. "It's kind of disrespectful if you don't use it." When the planchette twitched, my breath caught, but Alice quickly debunked any suspicions. Sorry, that was me. My hand was itching." Jenny rolled her eyes. "Christ's sake, this is so lame. We know you're here, why don't you just fucking..." I didn't even have a chance to process what was happening before Jenny's nose was pouring blood. A second later, I realized the wood under my hand was now that of the board. The planchette was gone, having flown out from beneath our fingers to smack Jenny square in the center of the face. Oh my God," she stuttered. When she pulled her hand away from the offended area, crimson began flooding over her bright, grinning teeth. Bitch. I did not feel as though this development was bitchin'. In fact, I was fairly sure it leaned considerably further toward not good at all. "Tuh," I objected eloquently. "Okay, I think that's enough," Alice remarked, rolling herself to the counter and grabbing a wad of paper towels to toss in Jenny's general direction. We were looking for spooky, not violent. Let's say fuck this board and the horse it rode in on, and trash the whole thing. Yeah? The door slammed shut. Because of fucking course it did. I don't think I need to reveal that it wouldn't open. I did try, but I knew before I'd even touched the handle that it wasn't going to happen. What would the point have been in closing us in, if we could just leave? Ding, ding, ding. That's right. Nothing. "Oh, come on," Alice groaned. "I said we were done. We're sorry. Okay. We fucked around and found out, and we won't do it again. Just let us out and nobody ever lays a finger on this board again, I swear." Whatever had shut the door, it did not let us out. You know how, in horror movies, every time there's a telekinetic, people end up pinned to walls by furniture? Just picture that. That's what happened. It was so quick too. That part sort of fascinated me, in a strange, detached way. 1 second I was trying my damnedest to pry the door open, and the next I was stuck between the dishwasher and a mobile coffee cart that, hand to the Bible, only weighs 50 pounds, but somehow had me absolutely cemented in place. Shit. I heard Jenny exclaim and looked up from my own predicament to find that she was trapped in the corner by nothing but a floor lamp, blood still gushing from her nose. It took a little more work to box Alice and her wheelchair in, so naturally the entire table had been flipped on its side and the legs surrounded her, each of their stoppers secured to the wall behind her. On the center of the floor, the planchette lay atop the board. Slowly it began to move. "Adam, what's it spelling?" Alice cried, because I was closest. The lighting made it difficult to make out the letters etched into the board's surface, but not impossible. Squinting, I read aloud, "Sir, R.I. Okay, no sacrifice. Nobody's sacrificing anything." The board didn't seem to care to hear my protests. It finished spelling the word and then circled down to the number 1, and then blood, unwilling, done. I was about to get confused enough to ask what in the fresh hell that was supposed to mean, but then it started up again. This time the sequence was 1 flesh, willing, choose. A sick, terrible realization washed over me. 1 unwilling blood sacrifice, I said. Done. Jenny, that was you. Now it needs a willing flesh sacrifice, and it wants us to choose who it comes from. I turned back to the board. Is that right? Yes. All right, wait. What constitutes as flesh? Alice asked. Like, could we bite off a hangnail? No. So, live flesh only? Yes. We should probably be screaming for help, Jenny reasoned. I mean, right? I don't know about y'all, but I'd really rather not sacrifice any of my live flesh. A sicker, more terrible realization washed over me. Alice, I said, even, measured. If we call for help, this thing might let somebody else into the room and trap them too. We don't want anyone else to get hurt. And we don't want to get hurt either, of course. But hurt is such a dynamic term. 'Cause technically, if you're harmed, you're hurt. Sure, I'll give you that. But if something doesn't hurt you, you bastard, Alice accused, because she was smart enough to know precisely what direction I was steering the conversation in. I am not fucking cutting off one of my toes just because I can't feel them. But no, I didn't. But I stopped while I was ahead, because I had, and we all knew it. I'm sorry, I sighed. You're right. That's incredibly fucked up. I'm just kind of freaking out and I don't know what to do, and my brain's trying to improvise. Alice glared at me for a solid 5 seconds and then snorted, shaking her head. You should have seen your stupid face. Why wouldn't I do it? I can feel it. Then to the board. That still counts, right? You said flesh, not pain. A pause. Then, I guess. Does it have to be a toe? Or can I just cut a chunk of skin out? You said flesh. I reminded the board a second time. Not but my game. The board shot back. My rules. Alice took a breath and nodded her head, resigned. Fine. Can I get a knife? The drawer next to me whipped open so fiercely that it bashed against my elbow, prompting me to cry out. Slowly, as though it was floating, a small, dull paring knife rose into the air. Oh, you are a sick son of a bitch. Can I not at least have something more likely to cut steak than an old woman's gums? The drawer slammed shut. Guess not. The knife floated across the room to Alice at a snail's pace, and I could feel the anxiety mounting in my chest with every inch. Were Jenny and I really just going to watch her mutilate herself? We couldn't, could we? But what other choice did we have? Who knew what this thing was capable of? To the best of our knowledge, it could have been letting us off easy. If we drew attention to ourselves, the entity could use us as bait to lure in every single person in the building. It could pick us off one by one. There was a knock. We all froze. So did the knife. Hello? Horace called from outside the door. Is there a reason I'm locked out? There's an evil Ouija board trapping us inside, and it said Alice has to cut off her toe or it won't let us out. Incredulously, I looked to Jenny. What? She snapped, exasperated. It didn't let him in, so clearly your theory is bullshit. We need help. Horace, we need help. The fucking door. Fucking open. Horace stepped inside, eyes wide and wild. The fucking door fucking slammed shut. Fuck, I hissed. I knew this shit was going to happen. I knew it. Horace. Horace held up a finger to silence me, taking a moment to look around the room and fully assess the situation. Then he sat down on the floor, large legs pretzeled into a crisscross fashion, and placed his fingertips on the planchette. In a confident, practiced fashion, he began reciting something. I only heard it the one time, and I don't speak Latin, so I couldn't recount it here if I tried. But it was a chant, that much was clear. It consisted of 5 or so lines repeated in succession. And once he'd made it fully through 3 rounds, it was as though all the power drained from the magnetic force holding us all in place. It happened so abruptly that when the coffee cart rolled away from me on the natural slight slope of the floor, I fell straight forward, catching myself with my hands just in time to save my face from smashing into the tile. Jenny crashed to the ground and took the lamp that had been holding her hostage down with her. And the table blocking Allison toppled onto its back, freeing her from the wall. I blinked. "What?" Jenny demanded. "The fuck was that?" Horace slid the planchette to goodbye and stood, dusting himself off. "Don't mess with things you don't understand," was all he said. Then he crossed the room to the refrigerator, extracted a bottle of water, and left. Needless to say, since we had, as Alice put it, fucked around and subsequently found out, our endeavors with the board were over. We gave Matt the whole rundown and he berated us for being fucking stupid, rightfully so, and then told Jenny that her broken nose would not be covered under workers' comp because it was her own damn fault. The board is still in the building, as are the other various occult items we received along with it, because we weren't sure how to properly dispose of any of it. We did try to ask Horace, since he clearly possessed some background knowledge that the rest of us did not, but he denied having any idea what we were talking about, which is fairly characteristic of him when he absolutely is not going to address something. So, we're solo on that front. We've never seen the man that brought it all in again. I'll admit, I am frequently tempted to try to decipher the writing in the journals at the very least. There's something about them that keeps me up at night once in a while, just turning that solitary line of English over and over in my brain, by my mind and by my spirit, but I truthfully have no idea where to start. And even if I did, well, I've learned enough in my time here to understand that, more often than not, it's better to let dead things lie. Today, I want to explain what's been going on, what's still going on, as of late. I said, when I told you about how I went upstairs, that I did it again. One more time. That's where we're going to start. And then, well, talk about the aftermath. Every great once in a while, something fucks up so badly around here that not even Wiley can fix it. This time, of course, it was the HVAC system. Now, I don't think I need to tell you how incredibly careful we have to be letting people into certain areas of the building. And obviously upstairs is usually off limits, but it was unseasonably warm throughout the entirety of fall, and that meant that when our AC went out, it got hotter in the library than it did outside. I was coming in as Della was heading out. She works during the day a lot. I assume it's so no one will try to talk to her, and I watched her mop the sweat off her forehead with a cleaning cloth as she made her way toward the door. As soon as I set foot inside, I understood why. "Holy shit," I muttered, already stripping out of my overshirt as I approached Matt at the desk. "Why is it a sauna in here?" "I wanted a spa day," he quipped dryly. He was sweating too, dark hair matted to his forehead. "I've been upstairs with Wiley already. They couldn't figure out what the problem was, but the coast seems to be clear up there for now. So, we called in the big guns. They'll be here soon." I swallowed, but didn't voice my concerns. Matt knew better than I did how risky it was. "Okay," I agreed instead. "Let me know if you need anything when they get here." Matt nodded, offering me a 2-fingered salute, and I headed into the back to get to work. It took around half an hour for someone to show up, and when they did, Matt knocked on the wall between my desk and circulation, beckoning me out. "Can you hang up here till we're done?" he asked. "I'm gonna follow him, in case he needs to know where something is, or whatever." "Ha, yeah, whatever." "Sure," I said, forcing a smile. "We appreciate you coming out." The maintenance guy was youngish, somewhere in the ballpark of my age, I assumed. And when he grinned back at me, deep, boyish dimples appeared on either side of his mouth. "Happy to help," he breezed. "And if I can't get it sorted out, I'll call my dad." He pointed to the patch on his jacket which read Murphy's. "Hayes the boss man." Never seen a job he couldn't tackle. Now, what do you say we get you all cooled off? I say hell yeah, I chuckled, adamantly ignoring the ever-deepening pit in my stomach and knowing full well that Matt was doing the same. Hayes already checked it out, I reminded myself. There's nothing up there. Everything's fine. Oh yeah, the guy echoed enthusiastically. If I break something and the building catches on fire, just holler so I can come put it out. Name Sam. Adam, I responded, reaching across the desk to shake his hand. If I see flames, you'll be the first to know. They took off. For a long while, there was nothing. I checked out a handful of patrons, flipped through a few cookbooks, not for any real reason. I'm a millennial. I have no concept of how to feed myself anything that hasn't been warmed to perfection under a heat lamp, and finally resorted to bringing some books that had been written in out from my hoard to clean them, which fun fact actually just consists of extremely carefully sanding the pages and praying you don't tear holes through them. I was 9 novels into my pile when I heard it, a loud, mechanical screeching. I held my breath. Wiley appeared from between the stacks, eyes wide. The hell, they said. I shook my head. I watched their breath catch too. As we listened, there was a quiet rattling that had started just after the screech and hadn't quite stopped, and the longer it went on, the more my brain felt like it was vibrating. It's nothing, I said. I didn't believe it, and Wiley didn't either, so I repeated myself in hopes that it would stick. It's nothing. They're just moving stuff around up there, and it's scraping the floor. That's all. Yeah, Wiley agreed hollowly. That's all. That was, say it with me, not. We did spend a decent stretch of time trying to pretend that it was, but eventually the rattling grew louder, and the screeching started back up. And then you guessed it, screaming. I was halfway up the stairs before I even knew what had hit me, hollering behind me for Wiley to go and lock the doors so no one could come inside while God knew what was going down. I must have been running, footsteps echoing loudly enough on each step that Matt heard them, because when I nearly reached the top, he yelled, "God damn it, Adam, do not come up here." I wasn't going to pay a single fuck of attention to that, obviously, so I pushed myself harder, nearly tripping from the momentum when I reached the landing at the top. What I saw was, well, make sure you've read this installment before you continue if you haven't already, or none of the following will make any sense. He'll give you a moment to check. Back with me? Okay, now, have you ever heard the horse-sized spider vs. spider-sized horse's dilemma? If you haven't, let me explain. It's exactly what it sounds like. In your opinion, what's worse, one horse-sized spider or 1,000 spider-sized horses, both options with the intent to harm you, for the case of the scenario? There certainly weren't 1,000 miniature winged mechanical monstrosities before me, nor 100, nor 50, nor even 10. But the solid 5 flailing about with their sticky, dripping wings were enough to both metaphorically and literally bring me to my knees. They were identical to the thing I'd encountered upstairs before in most every way, except much smaller, smaller than me, even, only about half my size. And there was a fine coating of fuzz on their bat-like wings, almost like a gosling's down feathers. They were circling around in a frenzy, paying me no attention whatsoever. And as soon as my initial shock wore off, I saw why. They were entirely occupied by other targets. One of them had wrapped itself around Sam, who didn't look to be fighting back in any capacity, and two had pinned Matt's legs and torso to the ground, leaving him to fruitlessly attempt to beat them off with his fists. The rest were watching closely, awaiting their moment to strike. "Adam," Matt yelled again, warning. "I mean it." I stood and stepped forward, fully into the room. Something dripped onto my head. I touched it because what the fuck else was I supposed to do? And my fingers came away viscous, but still finger-colored. I felt my heart seizing up in my chest, the fear that it might be saliva chilling me to my core. But it dawned on me nearly as quickly as the thought came that if that were the case, I would smell it. I shuddered at the memory of the creature's foul, putrid breath and gathered my courage, tilting my head upward. The best way I know to describe the amalgamation of small wires and scraps of metal above me is a nest, which I guess makes sense if you don't think about it literally at all. Things with wings, things with nests, most of the time, right? Anyway, I didn't have long to ponder the logistics, because another glob of the clear substance leaked from a small gap in the structure, and had my reflexes not kicked in at precisely that moment, would have hit me square in the eye. I bent down to examine it, much easier to study now that it was in front of me rather than on me, and realized upon prodding that it behaved like a mixture of egg white and some type of oil. "Matt," I said, a sinking feeling rooting its way into my stomach. I think, maybe something's hatching. I'm only going to say this to you one more time, Matt threatened, struggle present in his tone. Get the fuck out. I hadn't bothered to respond to his demands thus far, knowing full well that all arguing would accomplish was wasting both our time, but I finally offered. I'm not leaving you. I'm sorry, I'm not. When I looked back over to him, to meet his eyes, it was the closest to desperation I'd ever seen him. His expression, his body language, even beneath the monster restraining him, everything screamed that he was silently pleading with me to leave. Something is wrong, Adam, he managed, voice tight. More wrong than just this. I wasn't sure at first. I thought maybe the time had just gotten away from me. But the clock. Are you wearing a watch? I wasn't. The sinking feeling sunk more heavily. I followed Matt's anxious gaze to the far wall, where the large digital clock mounted above one of the HVAC monitors read. The sinking feeling made its way into my feet. I came in at 7, I said dumbly. The fucking lights went out. Have you ever been inside a cave? The kind of darkness so all-encompassing you can see your hand in front of your face. That was this. Instant, complete black. I heard a groan, one that didn't belong to Matt, and felt a small wave of relief wash over me at the confirmation that Sam must still be alive. I didn't have any idea how to get to him, however, or any way to gauge where the winged monstrosities were in relation to myself. All right. This was Matt, as calm and measured as I'd ever heard him. Okay, Adam. Yeah. Right here. Can you walk toward me if I keep talking? I think so, I said, taking a tentative step forward and to my left. Are they still? But as soon as I asked, I became acutely aware of it. The silence. There was no flapping, no shuffling, no metallic screeching, nothing. Just keep walking, Matt told me. I wasn't sure if I liked the evenness to his tone. It sounded almost trained. I kept walking. Sam groaned again, but didn't form any intelligible words, so I didn't bother trying to call out him. Instead, I asked Matt, "Am I close?" "Keep coming," he said from just ahead of me. "You're close." A handful of steps further, and I startled, scarcely stifling a scream as I felt cold fingers wrap around my ankle. But Matt offered a quick assurance of, "It's okay, it's me," and I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. What he followed with, however, I'd never heard him say before, and it turned my blood to ice. "I need help." I swallowed, grateful for 1 millisecond that the darkness was thick enough to mask my fear. "With what?" I asked, praying I sounded steadier than I felt. "These things are on top of me. They just went limp when the lights went out and they're too heavy for me to move on my own." "Oh," I said, "God, okay. You made it sound like something worse." "Don't do that shit." I lowered myself onto my knees, feeling around in front of me until I had a solid grasp on what I was fairly sure must be the neck of one of the beasts, and counted aloud to 3 so that Matt would know when to push as I pulled. Together we dislodged it, casting its motionless form with a ringing thud onto the concrete floor. "One down. Is the other one on my legs?" Matt said. Mostly. Mostly? For a second, nothing. Then a heavy, defeated sigh as Matt lifted my hand, guiding it up and over his abdomen, to finally land on a patch of warm, slick flesh. Not sticky, not like the residue all over him from the monster's wings. This was different. This was Matt. There was no verbal response, but he pressed downward, guiding my fingers to wrap around something long and cylindrical and metallic. "Matt, there's a spike at the end of the tail," he explained as though he was casually discussing his day. "It's not barbed or anything, so it's fine, but it's too wet for me to pull it out. I can't get a grip on it." I closed my eyes, my vision unchanging, and prepared myself. "Okay," I said. I'd left my button down on the back of the chair at the circulation desk, so I tugged my t-shirt over my head and wound it around the thing's tail, forcing myself not to consider how quickly it was soaking through with blood. "Ready?" "Ready," Matt echoed, as swiftly as I could, so as not to draw out the pain any longer than I had to. Yanked the tail upward and out of Matt's side, casting it to the ground and utilizing the remainder of the adrenaline burst to shove the rest of the body off his thighs. He didn't make a peep, but his breathing fell into a shallow, unsteady cadence. "Okay?" I asked, even though no, obviously, he wasn't. But he would be, had to be. For a moment, I allowed myself to consider the very real possibility that this was what would finally do him in. that he would bleed out at my hands, and that there would be nothing I could do to stop it. But then he rasped, "Golden," and I felt my heart start pumping again. "Good," I breathed, balling up my shirt and pressing it into his palm. "Here, can you put pressure on it?" "Yeah, I got it. Try to get to the kid. See if you can wake him up." I forced myself back to my feet, stumbling blindly around in attempt to orient myself, and then, right on cue, Sam made another quiet, pained sound. I started toward it, shuffling my feet so that if I made it to him, I wouldn't find out by stepping on his fingers and crushing them. It was a process, a long one, that consisted of shuffling and stopping to listen and shuffling some more. And Matt asking if I'd made it yet and telling him no, but finally, the toe of my shoe came into contact with something. I bent down, reluctantly reaching out to brush my fingertips over whatever I'd collided with, and immediately relaxed upon registering the sensation of touching very human hair. "Hey," I tried, feeling around to find his shoulder and gently shaking it. "Sam?" I was met with a whine, but no real acknowledgement. "Sam," I said again, a little louder, shaking him a little harder. "Come on, wake up." This time I heard his breath hitch, but I had no idea if it was in response to me or the pain he was inevitably in. Either way, he still didn't say anything. "I've got him," I called back to Matt, but he's not white. Not just white, but the opposite of black. The white at the center of a flame. The white you can blink away after glancing at the sun, no matter how hard you try. The entire room was awash in it, just as blinding as the darkness, every bit as suffocating. Then, just as quickly as it had come, it was gone. The dim, yellow strip lights flickered overhead. I hadn't even noticed that the constant humming of the HVAC machines had stopped until it started back up again, green and red indicators blinking on in tandem. I was still crouched next to Sam, and I dared to glance at him, terrified of what I would find. He was completely still and completely unscathed. I whipped around, seeking out Matt, and found that he was already up and moving, about halfway across the floor to us. There wasn't a drop of blood on him. He tossed my perfectly gray, perfectly dry shirt to me, and I caught it rigidly, nearly too stunned to put it back on. "What?" was all I could manage. Matt shook his head. "I don't know." The creatures had vanished. I glanced back to Sam for a moment, and after determining that he was definitely breathing, crossed the floor to the entryway, casting my gaze upward toward the nest. It was still there, and the thin, gelatinous substance was still pooling underneath, readying itself for another drip. I couldn't tell if the creatures were inside or not. There didn't seem to be any active movement, and no sound escaped it. But I assumed they must be. There wasn't anywhere else for them to have gone. For a fleeting moment, I wanted to ask Matt if he had his lighter. I wanted to take the ladder down from the far wall and climb to the top and set the monsters ablaze, while they lay dormant. But I didn't. To be perfectly honest, I don't know why. Maybe because I couldn't begin to guess what wrath killing them would incur. Or maybe, well, I've always been a bit of a big, mean, scary animal apologist. They're just trying to survive, you know. Just like the rest of us. Obviously, I'm not going to lay down and die, but if something isn't actively harming me or anyone in my general vicinity, I can't imagine that wiping it out wouldn't feel a little like cold-blooded murder. And besides, not that I have solid proof, but if I'm going purely off intuition, I truly believe whatever was oozing out of the nest was these creatures' equivalent to some kind of disgusting amniotic fluid. Sort of feels like Matt shot their mom and now the rest of them are just trying to protect their new baby sibling. Also, I really had no way to gauge how well it would have gone. They could have bitten my hat off as soon as I was face to face with them. So I figured it was probably best to let sleeping dogs or robot dinosaur bats lie. What I couldn't let lie, however, was Sam. Apparently Matt had the same thought, because when I turned back around he was hauling him up by his armpits, still fully unconscious. "Here," I said, rushing over to them. "Let me help." Matt maneuvered Sam around so that I could pull his left arm around my shoulders, his right draped over Matt's, and together we wrangled him down the stairs, slamming the door to the mechanical room securely behind us. Right on the other side, Wiley was waiting, eyes flitting wildly from Matt to me to Sam. "What the fuck happened?" they demanded. I wasn't sure if they meant with the creatures or the time jump or what, so I was grateful when Matt responded. "A lot." "Is he?" "He's alive." I was secure enough in that at least to confirm it as fact. "Just knocked the fuck out." "Come on," Matt said. "Let's get him settled down somewhere." We took him out to the children's area and plopped him onto a beanbag chair, figuring it was the safest bet considering we didn't trust him to stay upright. It took a lot of light face slapping and some cold water over the head, but finally Sam's eyes shot open. "Hey!" I took a step back, afraid I'd startle him if I was standing too close. Freaked us out for a minute there. "Are you all right?" Sam blinked. Who are you?" "I'm Adam," I reminded him, my stomach begging to instantly fill back up with dread. "You're at the library. You came to fix our AC, remember?" Slowly, Sam's head turned side to side. I looked over to Matt. "It's okay," he assured me. "Probably just a concussion. Why don't you go give his dad a call? Let him know what's going on." "I think I've got him from here." "Yeah," I assented, glad to be given an out. "Okay." Pulling myself from my pocket as I walked away, I did a quick Google search for Murphy's hiding in air, double-checking that the first result was in the correct area before I hit call below the business hours, praying it was a personal cell that would still be reachable so late. After the third ring, a gruff voice answered, "Murphy's." I waited for a "how can I help you?" or maybe some kind of awful business slogan, but none came. "Hi," I started shakily. "Is this, Mr. Murphy?" A moment of silence, during which time I punched myself in the metaphorical fucking face. Because, God, could I not even have bothered to click the Facebook link at the top of the page to try to find his first name? And then, I owned the joint. "F, that's what you mean." "Yes," I said. "Okay, yeah, I just wanted to. I'm Adam Ward. I work at the library your son came to service this evening. I'm sure you're worried sick about him. I know he should have been back a long time ago, but I just wanted to let you know that he's..." Billy didn't take a call this evening. My internal dialogue defaulted to the dial-up sound. "Oh, sorry, and not Billy. Sam." Another pause. Then, "I ain't got but the one son, boy. Is this some kind of prank?" The dial-up sound grew louder. Just to be sure, I asked if he could confirm the location of his business. He did, in quite an irritated manner. "And there's not another Murphy's in the area that you know of?" "You got too damn much time on your hands, kid," he said, and hung up. I headed back to the children's area to inform Matt that we had a problem. When I reached him, he said, "We have a problem." "I know," I told him. Then when my brain caught up, "Wait, another one? Jesus H. What's your problem?" I stepped closer to Matt, lowering my voice. "Sam's dad doesn't know who he is." Matt laughed once. There was no humor in it. "Oh, good. I was thinking amnesia because my problem was that Sam doesn't know who he is. But I'm glad to hear it's a whole hell of a lot fucking worse." We did, of course, call an ambulance. And they did, of course, take Sam to the hospital. We told them everything we could, the name he'd given us, why he was at the library in the first place, and that he'd hit his head and couldn't recall anything, himself included. I'm not sure what their findings were, as they weren't allowed to disclose any patient information to anyone who wasn't family, which Sam didn't seem to have. What I do know, however, is that when he was released, he gave the cab driver the library's address. We waited days, weeks, hoping that we somehow contacted the wrong person, that news articles or missing posters would start cropping up, that we'd get a call asking about him from his dad's real company. Nothing. So, that's it. He's one of us now. He's happy enough. Seems to be anyway. Does whatever he can find that's not finished. Shelves when Horace is out, cleans when Bella's off, works Cirque when there's a gap in the schedule, great customer service, personable, friendly. Plus, while he's got a roommate now, there wasn't anywhere else for him to go, so I don't feel like I need to explain Matt's take on strays, especially when he feels like he's responsible. Like it's his fault. I just keep reminding myself that it could have turned out worse. He could have died. We all could have. And he's adjusting just fine. No signs whatsoever that he's starting to remember his old life, or starting to miss it. There's just one thing. Every once in a while, when he isn't actively working or talking or otherwise engaged, Sam will wander off. Every time I've found him, inside the mechanical room, just at the bottom of the stairs. First of all, I'm sorry it's been a while. I definitely never intend to go so long without posting. But sometimes when you're hit with the solid comorbidity of seasonal depression and executive dysfunction, that's just the way it is. I'm never going to promise any type of schedule because I know myself and I know I won't stick to it. But I will say that I'll try to be more consistent. Second, I do have new information regarding the donations we received a couple posts back. And while it's not what we're here to talk about this time, I promise we will very soon. so stay tuned for that. Lastly, Sam is doing really well. He still doesn't remember a lick of his life before the events of our last installment, and I think that's for the better. He's a hell of a worker, never complains or protests, just does what's asked of him and does it well. I've learned over the course of his time with us that while his memories are gone, his personality and interests are still fully fleshed out. He likes music, all of it. I keep trying to come up with god-awful songs to play for him that'll break the pattern, but his response is unfailingly, "Oh, a new one," followed by a horribly uncoordinated little jig. He also likes movies, but not so much new ones as absolutely ancient noir films. He'll happily watch whatever you put on though. His true passion, however, is cooking, if you can call it that. The problem is that none of it has any goddamn right turning out so good. Sometimes local food pantries donate surplus groceries to us, and a lot of it goes to our patrons with food insecurities. But whatever's left typically ends up in our staff kitchen until it rots. That's where Sam comes in. It started one night when we were deader than dead and Wiley was complaining about being both hungry and too lazy to go out and get something. "I can make you something," Sam volunteered enthusiastically. "I love to cook."
Oh.
Wiley blinked, clearly somewhat taken aback.
Ah.
"Thanks, but I don't think we have any, actual food here." Sam waved a hand dismissively. "He'll find something. It'll be good. Promise." And then he disappeared into the break room. About half an hour later, he returned with a large bowl. Inside it was God only knew what. I don't even know what to liken the sight to other than an AI-generated image. No part of it was discernible. It was an amalgamation of various textures and shades of beige mush. And Sam handed it to Wiley, positively beaming. Wiley eyed it, trying their best to contain their apprehension. "Bless him," Sam burst out laughing. "Okay, I know," he said. "I know it looks so gross, but it's good. It's a scramble. Oh God, hold on, I didn't even ask you. Eat meat, right?" Yeah, I eat meat," Wiley assured him, still clearly slightly stunned. "Okay, good. There's sausage in there." Tentatively, Wiley took a bite. I could see them cycling through emotions, and the moment the taste truly set in was visible on their face. "Holy shit. Wait, Adam, you gotta try this." I'll be honest, I had no idea whether they were about to ruin my life or not, but because I didn't want Sam to think I didn't trust him, I accepted the bowl, lifting a small forkful to my lips. It was stupid, ridiculous, otherworldly. "What did you do to this?" I asked, reluctantly handing it back to Wiley. I didn't want to. I wanted to keep eating it. "It's the love, man," Sam said jovially. "Everything tastes better when you're cooking with love." So, that was that. And now it's just a common occurrence. Sam's been cooking for pretty much all of us pretty much every night, and he seems thrilled to be doing it, which is fine by the rest of us. A couple of weeks ago, during one such instance, I was in the break room with him, just hanging out while he made a mess of the entire stove. And he said, "So, question, answer," I replied. He contemplated a moment, seemingly determining what angle he wanted to take. "Doug, is he? Do we, no. People talk about him sometimes, but I can't tell how serious anyone is. And I know this place is weird, so I don't know. I was wondering about it. Him." I could feel myself freezing up from the inside out. Though Sam doesn't remember the events that landed him here, he's been just as privy to the goings-on of the library as the rest of us since he came aboard. No matter how hard Matt tries to protect us all from the truth, it hasn't worked out once. I said. Sam put down the spatula in his hand, turning his attention fully toward me. I ducked my head, scratching the back of my neck. "It's complicated, but yeah, he exists." Already I could see him backtracking. He shook his head, turning away from me and back toward the stovetop. "Sorry, if you don't want to talk about it, that's totally cool. I was just curious. There's something about Sam that makes causing him to experience negative emotions, especially toward himself, unbearable. So, I sighed and pushed myself up onto the countertop, leaning against the cabinet behind me. "I met him," I began. "Once. A long time ago. And hopefully I never will again." "Oh," Sam said it casually, with enough nonchalance to make it obvious that he was trying with everything in his power not to pressure me. To ask why. It was the only thing that's ever really made me consider leaving. which is kind of funny if you put it into perspective. It wasn't life-threatening in the slightest. He didn't lay a finger on me. I'm probably in more danger eating whatever you're concocting than I was with him. Hey, Sam defended, nudging me with his elbow. I am a wizard with a whisk, a spatula sorcerer, a mixer maestro. Okay, that's enough, I snorted, cutting him off before it could get inevitably worse. Anyway, point is, technically, it was probably the safest I've ever been around anything unusual here, but I'd rather take a full shift of books flying off the shelves with the power clean out any day. Sam swiped a finger through the thick orange sauce that had gathered into a film along the side of the pan, then licked it and made a face, picking up an unmarked shaker of something green and presumably dried. So, what? Did he, say something to you? Something bad? I took a breath, steeling myself. It was a couple years ago now. Pretty quiet night, and I think it was just me, Jenny, and Alice here. I'd been in the back working on some repairs, and I got up to go to the bathroom after a couple hours. "'Cause you have a caffeine problem," Sam butted in. "'Cause I have a caffeine problem," I assented, pushing on. So I pee, wash my hands, whatever, and when I look up at the mirror, there's somebody standing behind me. Some guy, kind of startled, 'cause I didn't hear him come in, but there's nothing inherently creepy about him except that he's just like, and he's making full eye contact with me. Or, well, his reflection's making eye contact with mine, I guess. I'm thinking maybe he needs help or something until I really take in the whole picture and realize he's got on a name tag. It says Doug, left to right, just like if he was standing in front of me, but he's not. Ooh, 'cause it's a reflection, so his name should be got it. That's fucked. Okay, go on. Right. It should be backwards. And I'm not wearing one, but I'm still backwards. So I know it's not just some weird shit with the mirror, but I know who he is, obviously, and I know what the rules say I'm supposed to do, so it should be fine. I turn around, ready to greet him, but it's just empty air. Nobody's in the room with me. Back to the mirror, and boom, there he is, right over my shoulder. So, I'm just looking at him, and he's looking at me, and I don't know if protocol here is that I make the first move or not, but after a couple seconds, he says, "Hi, I'm Doug." It's loud too, and coming from behind me, not from the mirror. "Hey," I say, and then, because I'm supposed to, I know who you are, man. We've worked together quite a while now. "Oh," he says, right on cue. Does a whole theatrical facepalm and everything. "So sorry, my memory is just dreadful." "No big deal," I tell him. It happens, and then I wait, to see if he goes away, because according to the rules, he might. But he does. Instead, he goes, "Hey, just between co-workers, I've been a little nervous about my job performance lately. Do you think I've been pulling my weight?" "Whoa, are you kidding?" I ask. I'm playing it up a little, not really sure how enthusiastic I'm supposed to be, or if it even matters, but it's usually smarter to err on the side of unmistakably positive. "Dude, I don't know what we'd ever do without you. You're 100% irreplaceable." He smiles at me. It's weird, a little off, like that AI Sophia? She sort of only emotes with one part of her face at a time. It was like that, nothing going on in his eyes, just the grin. "Ew," Sam said. He'd moved on to another portion of his entree now, heating up vegetable oil in a large stock pot. "Okay, but that's supposed to be the end of it, right?" "That's all it says in the rules." "Supposed to be," I echoed, nodding solemnly. But it wasn't. Sometimes the rules are just there, Matt's best educated guess. Sometimes that means they're foolproof. Sometimes it means he took a shot in the dark, and we pray whatever situation we're in doesn't deviate from the textbook. Sam laughed, quiet, through his nose. "You mean like me?" I paused. Sam didn't know what had happened or where he'd come from. Not exactly, but he did know it wasn't under ordinary circumstances. We told him he just sort of stumbled in and collapsed, because it was the shortest, easiest explanation we could give him without causing him any grief for a family he'd never remember, and who would never remember him. As far as he knew, he was a John Doe. We said the only thing he'd managed to tell us was his first name before he hit the ground. "Yeah," was what I settled on, swinging my foot to the side to gently kick him in the thigh. "Except we got lucky with you. Usually when something comes up that's not in the rules at all, it's deadly at best." "What if I'm so dangerous and nobody even knows it?" He chuckled and then gasped, looking up from the pot before him to meet my eyes. "What if I don't even know it? Holy shit, maybe I have superpowers." "You do," I said. I've never met anybody in my life that can go so long without shutting up. He glared at me, but there was no fire behind it. Whatever, keep going. I kept going. So, I tell Doug has great at his job and I expect him to leave me alone. Or maybe vanish, since we're still just talking through a mirror. But he doesn't. He's just staring at me with that creepy-ass smile. And I'm afraid to look away. I don't really know why, but it feels like the wrong thing to do, so I don't. I just keep staring back until I realize something. Dude's not blinking, and I haven't been either. But I'm going to have to. I know that. Eventually it'll just happen, no matter how hard I try to force it not to. And I don't know why I hate the idea of that so much. But something in the back of my mind is just telling me I have to keep up eye contact. So I do, for as long as I can. But then it happened. I blink. I don't even think a blink takes a quarter of a second. That's how fast he's in front of me. I can barely see my own reflection now. He's blocking too much of it. There still isn't anyone physically in the room with me. Nobody's standing there, but his reflection looks like he's practically nose to nose with the mirror, which shouldn't even be possible considering where the sink is. But he's so close to it and it gives me a better look at his teeth. They're still bared, still doing the most to make me believe they're smiling. But there's a little gap between the two in the front, and something keeps barely poking in and out of it. It's fleshy and thin, and I can't really get a good look at it until finally, it just kind of slithers far enough out that it's clear what it is. A worm. Not an earthworm or a mealworm like some kind of parasite. And if some shit like that doesn't make you want to recoil, I don't know what will. But I can't do that because according to recent historical events, shit gets worse if I'm not watching. So I'm watching like a hawk, metaphorically shitting myself, and then this thing starts vibrating. Dude, Sam whined, not the vibrating mouth parasite while I'm literally cooking. I can stop talking about it anytime, I warned. You're the one that wanted to have this conversation. Groaning, he scrubbed a hand over his face. Okay, fine. I have to know the rest now. Yeah, I figured I wasn't gonna get that lucky. So the worm is vibrating, and I realize now that I can see it more closely. Dog's mouth isn't really moving the way it should be to form the words he's saying. It's just kind of being jostled around by the worm, open and shut. But I can understand him clear as day. Oh, I wouldn't say irreplaceable, is what comes out. I've replaced my suit more times than you'd believe. When one rots, another rises, and that's my job, riding the cycle. But you know that, of course. We have been working together for some time now, haven't we? I nearly didn't recognize you in your new suit. It certainly does become you, Adam. Whoa, hold on. I had Sam's full attention now. Frying be damned. What? I was shaking a little, from either the adrenaline or the anxiety of recounting the story for only the second time ever. I couldn't be sure which. Yeah, I said. I don't fucking know. I booked it the fuck out of there and never told anybody but Nat. He said, the things in this place, they'll do whatever they can to really get to us when they want to. They're good at getting in our heads, targeting our humanity, so to speak. Whatever it was doing, it fucking worked. Scared the hell out of me. Took me a while to get back with the program and believe I was a person again. I could practically hear the wheels turning in Sam's head. Hey, I said, snapping him out of it. You're not a parasitic demon worm driving a meat suit either. You've just got amnesia. You know who gets amnesia? Humans. Yeah, but I don't. He stopped, chewing on the inside of his lip. I don't care. That can't be normal, right? Like I should want to know what happened to me. But I don't. And I think if I found out, I don't know. I can't imagine wanting to leave. For anything. Why do you think that is? For anything, why do you think that is? I wanted to tell him he just felt that way because this was all he knew right now. But I didn't. Instead, I told him the truth. Because you're one of us. You're part of this place now. Even if most of us have houses we go to sleep when we clock out, we never really leave here. Not sure if you've noticed, but none of us really has much of a life. No close friends outside of work. Not much family, if any. I don't think ending up here is ever really an accident. Sam thought on it for a moment and then the corner of his mouth turned up.
It's kind of like we're a special collection. Like the library curates us.
Yeah, I agreed fondly. It kind of is. So anyway, that's it. My one experience with Doug. I thought maybe writing it out would help me get it out of my head, because I haven't really been able to stop thinking about it like at all since Sam and I talked. I try not to let it get to me anymore, and it doesn't, most of the time. But every once in a while I just find myself wondering if there was anything to it. I know, rationally, that there wasn't, that there can't be. But I've been doing a lot of running my fingers over my skin lately, just to make sure there's nothing moving underneath. So, a while ago, by which I mean who fucking knows how long ago now, it was just me, Sam, and Matt working. Me mending. Matt on the desk, Sam in the stacks. I can sorta kinda see the front door from my not office if I'm really looking. And for whatever reason, I happen to be doing so just as someone stepped inside. There's just a vibe sometimes about people's intentions. The guy entering the library wasn't in a uniform, but he was in a suit, and he looked unnervingly official, very much like he meant business. Matt doesn't like people who mean business, so I, purely on instinct, headed out to Sir. As I knew he would, the man approached the desk. "Even in," he said, nodding. That wasn't good. Nobody nodded like that unless they meant real business. "Even in," I echoed, because that was how he said it, and because sometimes GS are too serious. "What can we do for you?" "Well, gentlemen, let me introduce myself. My name is Brixby Leadingham. I'm a private investigator." He paused here, extracting a badge from his pocket and holding it up for Matt and I to inspect. "And I have reason to believe you may be in possession of some artifacts. Would you mind if I took a look around?" I glanced at Matt, with a lowercase g, not an uppercase one, because GS are serious as it is, and because I was trying to be inconspicuous. He didn't look like he was planning on opening his mouth anytime soon, so I said, "Sure, probably a lot too enthusiastically. Can I ask what artifacts exactly? Might be able to just point him right out to you." The man looked around in a somewhat Machiavellian manner, though I interpreted it as an over-dramatization of checking his surroundings to be sure we were alone. I've been on a particular individual's trail for some time now. His current whereabouts are unknown, but the last security camera footage I was able to track down on him was right outside on the street, on his way into and out of this building. He had a bunch of boxes with him, and when he left, he was empty-handed. Sound familiar? I paused, genuinely considering. We get a lot of donations, so I'm not totally sure I could pinpoint one person. "Do you have any specifics?" He leaned in closer, voice dropping to a whisper that wafted warm, sugary breath over my face. "These wouldn't have been ordinary donations. They'd have been of the occult variety." "Oh," I said, because fucking duh. "I know exactly who you're talking about. We've got here, just follow me." I started to head out from behind the desk, but Matt full-on mom-armed me, physically halting me in my tracks before I could make it more than 2 steps. "I got it," he told me. "You stay up here." This time, I glanced at him. Capital G. "Oh, okay." He did not glance or even glance back, just walked around the counter, indicating that Brixby Leadingham PI should accompany him. In case you were wondering, yes, I did. In fact, get instantaneous flashbacks to Matt watching Matchtrace after Sam and leaving me to wonder whether or not he'd ever come back. They were totally, completely unwarranted flashbacks though. I knew that, because Matt was just taking this guy to look through some stuff we'd had for probably 2 years. And we'd definitely already experienced the worst of it with the Ouija board fiasco. The most that could come of it was the rest of the shit that was brought in with it being taken off our hands. Straightforward enough.
But Adam, you might ask,
If everything was kosher, why wouldn't Matt want you to take Brixby Leadingham PI to the occult artifact donations? Yeah, great fucking question. We'll get there. So, for a while I was just hanging out. And then Sam finished shelving, so we were both just hanging out. Nobody was coming in, so we were still just taking turns seeing if we could flip rubber bands into the gap between 2 slightly askew ceiling tiles. A game Sam won by an absolute landslide, much to my chagrin. Once we lost enough of them to the abyss though, we moved on to tidying up behind the desk, which Sam enjoyed to an unsettling degree, and then to taking turns reading each other, whispered, dramatized passages of a stray Harlequin romance we found lying on a cart. Pro tip: if you ever come across an old enough, worn enough trade paperback romance at your own local library, hold the spine flat against the palm of your hand and let it fall open. The page it lands on will at least 7 times out of 10 be the filthiest one in the book. And if it is, it will 1,000 times out of 10 be the most hysterical thing you've ever read. You're welcome. Anyway, after a while, in the middle of a sentence about a Highlander stroking something or other, possibly just hair but who really knows, Sam stopped and looked up, prompting me to also look up. Matt was back. Alone. His hands were covered in blood. He just stood there for a moment and let them drip onto the floor. And Sam and I just stared and let him let them drip. Finally, to Sam, he said, "Man the front, kid." And then in my direction, "You come with me." I went. In the back office, good old Brixby was lying on the floor with Matt's pocket knife sticking out of his neck. "Damn," I said. "So, he's not a PI," Matt finished for me. "Yeah, no. How did you?" "Had a feeling." "Then why did he?" "'Cause I wanted to corner him and get him away from you too." I nodded. "Because okay, enough said." The boxes containing the journals and divination tools were both open, and several of the items inside were lying askew, spread across the floor as though they'd been shuffled around during an altercation, which I realized they likely had. One of the journals, however, was separate from the rest, having been placed with clear intent upon the countertop nearest Brixby's head. It was open, only to the first page, bearing the strange symbols that Alice and Jenny and I had marveled over when the books had first come into our possession. Fucker started reading it, and Matt paused to cough and then opted for his sleeve over his bloodied hand to wipe his mouth. I could tell shit was going down about halfway through the page. It got way too quiet, like the room was just sealed off all of a sudden and I couldn't hear fuck all except his voice. And then my head just started tingling. And that was enough to convince me to put a stop to that shit, which his crazy ass wasn't too keen on, so did what I had to do pretty much instantaneously. An awful fucking idea came to me. "What if we just took him upstairs?" I said. Matt blinked at me. "I mean," he said. I shrugged. "Grab his feet." "Now listen, I know it wasn't the most morally sound move, but what you have to understand is the havoc this place would release on at the very least the immediate vicinity without Matt. He's contracted in, and that keeps it at bay. If someone hauled his ass off to prison and he lost the building, either everything would be fucked beyond belief, or one of us would inherently become responsible. We look out for Matt, so he can look out for us. Simple as that. So, we figured, no body, no crime. Wiley could scrub the tapes easily enough, and we'd be in the clear. I grabbed not Brixby leading him, PI's feet. Or, I guess maybe Brixby leading him, not PI. I'm not clear on whether that was actually his name. The mechanical room was dark, save for the dim emergency light in the center of the ceiling. We dropped the body with a dense thud as soon as we made it fully through the entrance, both panting with the effort of dragging likely 2725 pounds of dead weight up an entire flight of stairs, and I couldn't help but take note of the eerie glow cast over the pallid skin of the face, making it appear as though it had been lifeless far longer than it had in reality. "How do you reckon we do this?" Matt asked, hands on his knees, smoker's lungs, still clearly not quite up to speed. Never wanted to get their attention before. I flicked my eyes upward to the assumed nest above the doorway. It wasn't dripping this time, but it was certainly still there, though poorly lit enough to prove difficult to make out. "Seems like the primary concern should be feeding for the little ones," I said, because fuck them kids. But using the word babies to describe the horrors that should have ended, and almost did end, Matt last time we'd had a run-in with them felt a little tone deaf. So maybe we just, I don't know, leave him here, and they'll get him when they're ready. We could come back and check later, make sure he's gone. Okay, Matt agreed, righting himself. Yeah, so that was that. We headed back down the stairs in silence, and then I told Matt I was going to lock the doors until Della came in to clean. Given the blood soaking cozily into several sections of flooring that we would undoubtedly only drive in deeper if we attempted to remedy the situation ourselves. He nodded, offering me a two-fingered salute, and split off toward the desk, likely to let Sam know we'd survived. I headed to the front, pulling the doors flush together, and raised my hand to turn the lock. But before I could get quite that far, something slammed with a wet smack into the glass, directly parallel to my face. You'd think we'd be so used to jump scares around here that nothing could startle us anymore. But as a self-proclaimed pussy, I jumped back a solid foot, barely catching myself in time to keep from planting ass first onto the ground. That foot of space was all the girl outside needed to push her way in before I had a second to carry out my intent with the lock. Well, I guess girl is a loose term. It was most of one though. It was really just that a slice seemed to have been carved out of her left side, from just below her eye socket into her upper thigh. No arm or anything there. Pieces of rib shaved off. Or, really, they just hadn't finished generating. But I didn't know that yet. I guess I screamed. I don't remember doing it, but I don't know why else Matt would have come running. Oh, he said, halting in his tracks just behind me. Oh, fuck. Oh, God. We were cold, the kind of girl said. There'd already been a steady trickle of blood streaming from the side of her mouth that wasn't formed. But when she parted her lips, it began gushing, coating her teeth in a viscous red-orange film. She didn't appear to be in any way perturbed by this development, which for some reason was the element that chilled me to the bone. Haha, I asked, because my brain was in my fucking guts. By the right, she elaborated unhelpfully. There was blood everywhere, I realized now. Her dark skin was glistening with it, and I absolutely felt guilty for failing to successfully lock her out and, by default, causing Della more work. Adam, Matt said. That was all, but knowing each of his intonations as well as my own, I understood that this one was a command. What? Who are you? I stammered, disregarding him. The calling, she responded, blinking back at me with dull, inexpressive eyes. Adam. Matt's hand was on my shoulder now, and I shook it off. No, I told him. Then, to her, the fuck does that mean? In the aftermath of the rite, she said, we, the calling, are called to eliminate the disciples who have failed to rise to enlightenment. Who among your herd is enlightened? Who among my? I started, but was cut off with a silencing wave of her hand. Not you. It is not your herd. You. She was looking past me now, through me. You need to turn around, Matt said, speaking directly to her for the first time, and walk back out that door. She simply stared ahead, unfazed, and repeated, who among your herd is enlightened? Out, Matt insisted firmly. Now. Instead, she took a step further inside, which inadvertently meant a step further toward me. In not sure what safety I thought it might afford me, but I caught my breath and held it in my throat, refusing to inhale what I knew would be the iron-dampened air around her. She was breathing plenty, enough for both of us. Quickly, I surmised that this was because she was sniffing me. After a moment, her brow furrowed, and her eyes bore with something akin to accusation into mine. There is no enlightenment here, she deduced. None anywhere. It stinks of putrid, rotting ignorance. Where was the rite held? When Matt grabbed her by the half of her throat that existed, his thumb sunk with a wet squelch into the exposed mass of tendon and muscle on the other side, which made me feel like I was about a quarter of a second from meeting God. But she didn't seem bothered in the least. Didn't even lift a hand to try to stop him, like it wasn't worth her time. And probably it wasn't. When Matt tried to push her back, he may as well have been duking it out with a wall of steel. She didn't budge, not an inch. In his defense, he didn't let an ounce of the fear undoubtedly coursing through his entire being show on his face. Instead, he insisted once again, that's enough. You're not welcome here. I said it's time to go. He'll give you a second on a scale of 1 to 10 to guess how poorly you think that went. If you guessed anything under a fucking 1,000, you're SLL. Not only did she slam him straight to the ground, his head hitting the tile with a sickening crack, she also stepped directly onto his wrist to surpass him, causing his arm to elicit a crunching sound bones just weren't designed to make. I winced, but remained otherwise frozen, warring internally with whether to stay and help him or run as quickly as I could ahead of the girl to warn Sam. Fortunately, as per usual, Matt made the call for me. Go, he said, breathless, but clear and alert. I'm good. Go. I went. To my absolute horror, when I turned back, I saw that she had already gained an ungodly amount of ground. Somehow, already, she had nearly reached the desk, where Sam was still standing, and long before I'd ever been able to intervene if I'd tried, she had caught his attention. Eyes wide, he stumbled back from the counter, taking in her left side, or I guess lack thereof, and her apparently non-existent concern for her condition. Sam, I hollered from behind her, but it was too late. She had made it to him already, slapping her sticky, blood-coated hand down onto the desk before him. You, she seethed. Where was the rite held? Something shifted then in his expression. I wasn't sure what at the time, and it was so minuscule, so close to imperceptible, that I nearly missed it. But he stopped shying away from her eyes, swallowed down his discomfort, and said, upstairs. Finally, A tension I hadn't noticed she'd been holding in her one existing shoulder seemed to relax. "Is the tone still there?" "Yes," was the response Sam opted for in place of asking her what the absolute bloody fuck was going on. "Would you like me to take you?" Rather than verbal assent, the girl held her singular, bloody hand out to Sam. I'd made it to them now, and I shook my head at him once with a curt, stern finality. His gaze flitted briefly to mine, but didn't linger. He stepped out from behind the counter and, steeling himself, took her hand. "What are you doing?" I demanded, grabbing the hem of his shirt as he made to turn away. "It's cool," he told me, tapping my knuckle with his to indicate that I should let go. "I've got it." I'll be honest. A part of me wanted to just let him. Not because I'd ever want anything bad happen to him, of course. It's just that sometimes this shit starts to weigh on you. But I didn't do that. I learned fairly quickly, with Sam, that if he had his mind made up, he was going to follow through with whatever it was he decided he was going to do, and there really wasn't any point in trying to dissuade him, so I followed him. He didn't try to stop me, likely for within the same ballpark of reasoning. And the girl didn't seem to give a shit that I was there as long as she thought she was getting what she wanted. So, win-win, I guess. Anyway, I didn't know precisely what Sam's plan was, but I'd have ventured to bet it flew entirely out the fucking window as soon as the girl saw the body of possibly Brixby leading him. Definitely not P.I. lying dead on the floor. The robodactyls still hadn't gotten to him yet, it would seem, and the way the girl started wailing, you'd think she'd been sawed in half. Well, in half. The other way. It was easily the most visceral, guttural scream crying I've ever heard in my 20-some years on his earth, and the sheer volume and intensity of it drew my attention momentarily from the fact that she was saying something. "Father" is what it was. Some shit started clicking there. That's some wordplay for you. Because shit started clicking, like in my brain, but also literally audibly. Some shit started clicking. It was a sound I remembered well enough that I didn't have a ton of time to zero in on the revelations I was having. On account of the imminent descent of the winged monstrosities. I guess I looked like I was about to piss myself. I was. Because Sam took that opportunity to project his voice over the unceasing shrieks and tell me, "It's okay. They're not. They won't hurt us. Just let them come." I didn't know what the fuck that meant, but I figured worst case scenario I'd be dead quick. And then it wasn't really my problem anymore. So I stood, unmoving, and watched them clamber clumsily down from their nest. The screaming was rapidly shifting form, spreading into a cacophony of something more sinister and abstract. And technically nothing was happening to the almost body before me, but I began to perceive it differently as the mechanical bat bird started to swoop down upon it. It felt less like a malformed body and more like the idea of one, and I shuddered when I remembered something it had said downstairs about we. It did, in fact, sound more akin to multiple voices than a singular net, and it wasn't quite moving in the tandem way that a body belonging to a singular consciousness should. It was becoming more disjointed, twitching and flailing, and I realized, frantically scrambling to protect the body of our dearly departed Brixby. "What the hell?" Sam said, which drew my attention back to him and returned my fascination to the fact that, true to his word, the flying horrors were indeed not attacking us. "Yeah, what the hell?" I echoed. "How come they're not eating us?" Sam looked over to me, a little guiltily, and shrugged. I don't know. They just don't hurt me, and I knew if you were with me, they wouldn't hurt you either. I don't have a good answer right now. I'm trying to figure it out."
I didn't press him on it, because fine, fair enough. I knew, realistically, that he'd been up here on his own on several occasions. For every time I'd caught him standing at the foot of the stairs, there were probably 2 times I hadn't, and he was still kicking so far. Sometimes shit's just weird here. I think we're all aware enough of that. We went back to watching the creatures rip apart the corpses, plural, they were both certainly dead now, before us. Viscera flying haphazardly between them. The frenzy making it difficult to tell how much of either of them was left after some time. "They're getting bigger," I noted quietly to myself, juxtaposing a mental image of the winged horror's size when I'd seen them last to the swarm in front of me now. "Yeah," Sam agreed, scratching anxiously at his right arm with his left. Then, to my surprise, "They're doing okay without their mom, I think. Doesn't seem like they really need to eat often at all. This is more like a treat, I guess." Ha! I wanted to grill him about how he knew anything about their mother, the one who Matt had shot to save me before Sam was ever here, and also why the fuck he knew anything about their eating habits,
But this didn't feel like the time, partly because we were watching two people, or people-adjacent beings at least, be eviscerated, but also because the wailing was back, except that practically everything about it had changed. It was hard to say, really, how I could tell they were the same voices as before, but I knew it. Sam did too. I could tell from the way he stilled next to me. They were disembodied now, though. There was nothing for them to tie themselves to now that their host was gone, but that didn't keep them from speaking their piece. Our final form was never reached. The voices whispered from nowhere and everywhere around us at once. As though someone had flipped a kill switch, the avian nightmare stopped cold, frozen in midair. We have generated incomplete vessels in the past, so at first we bade it no mind, but this time there was a cause. The rite was not completed. Something cut it short. Something cold, father. Now, this set off a couple of warning bells for me, because how had Matt's pocket knife taken out something we were currently being led to believe was more powerful than what had appeared to be a relatively small, three-quarters formed, roughly late teenaged girl who'd laid him out flat with nothing more than the flick of her fingers. However, I didn't feel particularly invited to toss my 2 cents in the well, so I made the informed decision to not. As I'd anticipated, the conglomerate of unison speech continued, gurgling and tangling over itself. This will be a heavy weight to bear, a handsome debt to pay. The culling will not rest until a vessel is rebuilt, until we avenge Father by ascending his conqueror in his stead. Every drop of blood in my body felt as though it was slowly, agonizingly turning to ice. I didn't have the details, but I didn't need to. I understood what I was hearing. Whatever bullshit circus this was, B, leading him, Untitled had been its fucking ringleader, and now Matt was set to take his place. No, I heard more than felt myself say. No, you don't fucking touch him. There has to be something else you want. What is it? What's an acceptable trade? There was a long, swelling pause. I thought briefly that my counter wasn't going to be entertained. Then, eerily, as though the sound was seeping from the walls, the herd may come to the agreement as one, to sacrifice something that can neither be traded nor bought. I heard Sam swallow next to me, and wondered if he was as nauseous as I was. What do you mean? He asked. What does that mean? Something that can't be traded or bought. We understand it in far more depth than your kind could ever dream of. But what we ask of you is, in your terms, time. Sam and I exchanged a glance. As long as you come to a consensus, the voices went on. It shan't be much. Not enough to impact your dismal life expectancies. Do this, and your shepherd shall be free. Fine, I said instantaneously. I know. Not making deals with shit isn't even in the rules, which is undoubtedly because Matt didn't think he'd ever hire anyone stupid enough to need something so obvious spelled out for them. I'm truly 1 in a million. In my defense, though, Sam shadowed me. Fine, he said too. Whatever. Just leave him alone. We shall remain here, the chorus promised, for the rise and set of 7 suns. On the eve of the 8th rising, unless your deliberation has sooner ceased, we will collect our due. If each member of the herd does not consent to sacrifice their measure of time willingly, your shepherd's ascension shall commence. The sound wasn't any different, really, than any of the breaks in speech had been thus far. It was the feeling that told us the conversation was over, like the air in the room was moving differently somehow, even before the monstrosities had unpaused. They lagged a moment, but sluggishly started to move again, though by no means at their typical pace. They dragged themselves along the floor, their metalwork bodies suddenly too heavy for their wings to support, leaving trails of sludgy blood in their wake. Sam, bless his heart, looked concerned. Do you think they're hurt? He wondered aloud, kneeling to inspect the nearest one more closely. I was morbidly, desperately curious as to whether he had any idea that they were somehow at fault for his lack of an existence outside of the library. I'd had suspicions straight from the get-go that he wasn't fully convinced by our cover story, but unpacking his relationship to them in the midst of the current situation didn't feel appropriate, so rather than questioning it, I opted to let him go about his mother hen fretting for a minute until finally, the things kicked their half-speed setting and darted back up to the ceiling to hunker down again. Iron bull bellies full of presumably human flesh. Maybe they were just booting back up, I said, clapping a hand on his shoulder. Come on, let's get the fuck out of here. Matt's hurt, I think. Not bad. That around here means an injury's not life-threatening. But he might have a concussion and his wrist has got to be broken. Oh damn, Sam said, surveying the damage on the ground and then waving a hand at it, dismissively. They'll lick the rest up later. Let's go. Matt was looking for us, unsurprisingly, when we made it back out to the main floor. Where is she? He asked, trying and failing to fully suppress how frantically he was studying both Sam and myself for injuries. Sam opened his mouth, but I cut him off before he could get a word out. Gone, I relayed simply. He couldn't, of course, know what we'd agreed to. I was sure Sam and I were on the same page about it, but just in case, I wasn't going to take any chances. Matt nodded and then clenched his jaw, likely against the pain in his skull. Okay, I asked. Della's here, he deflected. Think we're still gonna shut it down for the night though. Just give us some time to get everything straightened up. You can head home, Adam, if you want. All right, I said. I didn't though. I think he knew I wouldn't. Instead, Sam and I pretended not to notice the snoring approximately 5 minutes after he disappeared into the back to do some paperwork. And then we got to work helping Della clean up the floors, only with whatever products she shoved into our hands. Naturally, it wasn't until the next night that we called the meeting. Unsurprisingly, it was unanimous. Della even tipped her head in confirmation. I'd like to call back to the beginning of this post when we discussed the universal understanding of the utmost importance in this building centering unwaveringly on protecting Matt. The discussion didn't go down without questions. Alice wanted to know how much time we were offering up. We had no clue, and Horace wondered how we knew whatever this entity was would play fairly. We didn't, and Jenny requested that we repeat every detail of the encounter to the letter in case there was something she could pick out that we managed to miss. There wasn't. Wiley, perhaps the most unwaveringly loyal to Matt of us all, only asked what we needed to do to seal the deal. We decided we'd take the time we were allotted, just to do whatever we felt we could to prepare ourselves. It was still too fresh on my mind the day after, too suffocating, which gave me the perfect opportunity to shift my focus to the story about Doug. But I planned to write all this out before we made it to the end of the week, and to post it as quickly as I could to try and garner some advice. But that was apparently a year ago. The funny thing is, in all our consideration, we never thought that whatever time we might forfeit may not be taken off the ends of our lives, but rather carved right out of the present. I don't know what the date was. Everything is too blurry around the edges. This platform only shows me that I last posted 1 year ago, so maybe it was a little longer, maybe a little less. I'm not sure. It's been nearly a week now that we've been back. If it's all the same, I'd rather not get into the specifics of waking up to the realization that I was missing the last year of my life. We're operating the way we always do, the way we always have. We're moving along. We experienced it together. At least, Jenny started the group call within 60 seconds of the lot of us returning to awareness, and I was surprised by the gravity of the relief that shocked my system when I learned that if I was finally losing the last shreds of sanity I had left, at least I wasn't doing it alone. The biggest difference I've placed so far is that every book in every box in the room where the donations were held, along with the boxes themselves, and everything else that came in them as well, has vanished. I want to know what happened to them, where they are now, if they're anywhere at all, if they were destroyed or buried, or if they glitched out of existence when our deal was fulfilled. But I can't ask. Matt's right wrist clicks when he types now, like a long-healed fracture that was never set quite back in place. But as far as we can tell, that's the closest to any memory he has of the events of that night. As far as we can tell, he's none the wiser about the bargain we made. As far as we can tell, he has no idea we were ever gone. That's it for tonight's stories, but the nightmares never end. If you enjoyed these chilling tales, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a new upload. Got a scary experience of your own? Share it in the comments. I just might feature it in a future video. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, some things are scarier than they seem in the dark.